So yeah, you're seeing this monster video pop up on your feed, a video with well over 3 hours of content talking about the Life is Strange series.
You blow me, Rachel.
Chloe.
As I'm in the middle of doing a big transition at the moment, I just figured this would be a fun little idea to combine these 3 videos on Life is Strange into one super video. Makes it easier for people to see my content on them, allows new people to binge the content in more long form, and allows me to have a large video on the channel for people who want to come back again and again. But before we begin, I have to say something that's very important. I do plan on revisiting the Life is Strange series later this year. These games are fascinating to different degrees, and in videos, I often focused on different aspects, such as unlikable characters, how not to do a prequel, and how politics can make a story dull. Still, I want to give the games their fair shake and not just focus on the aspects that I did above. Either that or focus on separate topics concerning these titles. And to address something, yes, I am aware of Erlich Salad. Yes, I did get inspiration from him. No, you don't have to keep reminding me about it. I gave credit in my initial videos, and I'm giving credit now for my points that I have taken from him, and I'm going to admit that. So with that, I'm going to disappear and allow you guys this ramshackled combination of a video. So, when I made my video about Yick, I made it clear that Alex of the game was an unlikable protagonist, and that it's a balancing act in order for you to make sure that you don't turn off your audience when you are introduced to a character like this.
You guys realize how messed up all this is? My 12-year-old sister killed herself. She died right here, right where we're standing.
Hey, dude, cool it with that! No one cares about your sister right now. We almost just died ourselves!
Obviously, I think you guys understand where I stand with that game and Alex.
Shut when you think about it.
I think it's important to understand that unlikable characters can work, and while they're designed to be not likable, they can still be adored by people. Villains are a great example of this, since these are characters by design to be hated by the audience, and yet you'll see people who will go gaga over these characters who do terrible things, sometimes to a very disturbing degree. Today I want to talk about hateable characters, providing a good example and a bad example of how to do this kind of character in video games specifically. Because while if you want to make a hateable character, said hateable character can turn to a character that people can come to love, even when they really shouldn't. Ha!
Show me your strength.
The 2 examples I'm giving are both game franchises that, coincidentally enough, are getting 3rd official installments to their franchises this year even. And now that I've gotten that out of the way, Life is Strange f***ing sucks. So look, I know I'm talking about a game that's years old at this point, has a lot of popularity behind it, and has a number of awards to its name. And part of the reason why I'm even bringing this up is because of the fact that the 3rd part in the series of the games is coming out, which, hey, whatevs. Looks interesting, I guess?
Sure, Dan.
But there are a ton of problems that seem to fly under the radar that not a lot of people are willing to talk about when it comes to the first game and its prequel. I'm not saying that I see the truth, and what I'm about to say is nothing but fact. But this is just stuff that has bugged me after coming back to the game years after I initially played it. Still, for those who are in the back who don't know about this game, Life is Strange is about a girl named Max Caulfield, because of course we need to have a Catcher in the Rye reference in our teen drama in order to flex our big writer brains, who has the ability to rewind time, use this power to save a childhood friend named Chloe, who then decides to use and abuse Max's powers throughout the game.
Jesus, I shot myself! Ugh, I shot myself! Back up! Back up!
Stupid gun.
In order to investigate the disappearance of her friend, Rachel.
I had such a crush on her. Until I met you, Lois. You're my silver medal.
So the 2 decide to play as Hardy Boys.
So what do you Hardy boys want?
And are out to solve this missing person's case. The basic idea is that you've got Max, who's a complacent introvert, working with Chloe, the troublemaking extrovert, and their personalities and characterizations are supposed to complement each other to help push the relationship onto the viewers, as well as showcase that these 2 grow closer throughout their hardships. It's basic storytelling 101. Introduce 2 characters, put them in a situation, the 2 learn from each other, and grow because of their relationship. Bada bing, bada. Obviously, for the sake of time and such, I'm boiling down this formula to its basics, but that's typically where this type of story goes. Now, if you read the title, it's right down there, and as such, this should give you a clue as to why I'm bringing this up. Well, the thing is, with the character Chloe, the game expects you to like her, just as Max does throughout the story. Here's the thing though. Chloe's a terrible character, both in the sense of being a terrible character story-wise and an unlikable, terrible person. And yet, the game expects me to actually care for her. Alright, so just to point out this, because I know there's going to be that one guy in the audience. Yeah, I'm aware it's my opinion. You're watching an opinion piece on a platform where pretty much every single person is giving their opinions. That is not a form of criticism. The game has a lot of inconsistencies when it comes to not only the characters, but the mechanics of the game as well. Stuff like how they ripped off the telltale form of storytelling.
I will remember this conversation.
Nope! There's even issues with the time traveling aspect of the story. And I know this is more based on the gameplay, but considering that the time travel is a major portion of the story and is necessary for some of the major plot threads, especially since you use those powers to save Chloe from killing herself, we do need to talk about those before we actually get into the character writing. But hey, if you don't care, I'm sure I've got some chapters down below for you to skip to. So feel free to save some time. We'll be talking about the 3 aspects of time travel in the story. Inventory, teleportation, and the bullshit new power that comes out of left field. When it comes to Max's inventory, we're blatantly told by the game that anything in your inventory when you rewind time will remain there. So if you pick up a hammer in the bathroom, instead of using it to break the mirrors, you take it with you when you travel through time. Makes sense, right? Well, unfortunately, the game likes to play fast and loose with the rules. In the same chapter, when we see a character being accosted by David, the resident security guard and Chloe's stepfather, Max has the non-choice to take a picture or intervene. Now, the smart player, especially those who have any sort of reading comprehension in a game that is, well, all about paying attention to words, you would know that you'd be able to do both of these because of the aforementioned inventory system. Because you're able to go back in time after this event and redo it. You do the first go around by taking the picture, reverse time, and then after you have the photo in your pocket, you go and defend Kate. Best of both worlds, right? Well, for some reason, the photo disappears. I guess ninjas from outer space popped in to steal the photo from Max's pocket so they could deliver it to the great tentacled beast that is Cthulhu for, I don't know, lunch. Look, this is going to be a long video. I need some fun in order to keep my sanity, especially with the amount of assets I'm working with this. Now, you may be thinking, okay, so maybe that's a bit of a misstep in the powers, but mistakes happen, and I agree. Stuff like this does happen, and unless it's a reoccurring deal, I tend not to make it a big deal most of the time. But here's the problem, it is a recurring deal. And that leads us to our second issue with the story's temporal rules, teleportation, or the lack of it as it were. I know, it's confusing, but let me explain. The very first time Max uses her powers when Chloe gets off in the girls' bathroom, that's not a spoiler, and even if it was, I warned you people already at the beginning. Anyway, when Max uses her power, she teleports back to her classroom. Nothing too out of the ordinary, it just makes sense. And then the player gets control, and Max's time-traveling powers activate, keeping her in place. Bravo, don't nod, you managed to break your rules in the first go. That'd be pretty impressive if it wasn't a common trend nowadays in writing. Then finally we get to the bullshit power. By looking at a photo, Max can time travel back to a point where the photo was taken. Just to point something out, this was never established in the story before and comes out of nowhere. It's literally what a lot of people like to call an ass pull. And the first time we do see this, well, there's a reason why I'm explaining how these powers work, and you'll see later. Now, I want to make it clear, the reason why we went on a tangent to talk about Max's time powers is that it's going to save me time in this video that I'd rather get it out of the way right now and save some explanation later. Back to the story, more specifically in the context of this video, the whole point of this game is the relationship between Max and Chloe. That's the main hook of this game's story, especially considering that the gameplay is messy, to say the least. So you would think that this is the main part of the game, as the entire narrative is built around these two characters, that they'd have to be likable to some degree, or at the very least be interesting. Unfortunately, that is not the case, at least to me. A lot of this stems from the fact that Chloe is a terrible character, and yes, I'm well aware of the title of my own video. I wrote the damn script. But here's the problem. The game expects me to like Chloe, especially since there's no option to let Chloe kick the bucket.
Max! Help! I'm stuck!
Now, I know what you're thinking, again. Deja vu. Which is weird because I haven't written this down in the script yet, but I'm not actively wanting to kill this character. Sure, there are characters in games that I wish I could strangle, but that's mainly due to how they're portrayed and how the story goes. Well, that and sometimes their game is just utter trash when I play it.
He literally just disappeared and went into the fucking wall.
But for me, Chloe is probably the worst aspect of Life is Strange, and unfortunately I can't do anything about it. I mean, I can rant about it on YouTube and maybe someone will listen to what I have to say. So let's go over why Chloe has such a negative effect on me and why I believe that she's the perfect example of how not to make a hateable character.
downward spiral, downward spiral, downward spiral, downward spiral, downward spiral.
Side note, when I get to my examples, I'm going to be jumping around and not going into chronological order, probably, so heads up on that if this seems a little confusing. Characters doing bad things doesn't make them a badly written character. You need only look towards characters like Brad Armstrong, Cloud Strife, Kyle Hyde, or any of the characters in the Disgaea series. These characters do things or act in ways that are unsavory to anyone who plays the games they're in. After all, when you have characters who display negative traits in the game, you have a chance of making your audience less receptive to the character. But there are things that you can hook the character onto that keep your audience invested. It can either be through the overall story, the gameplay, or it can even be other characters of the game. There needs to be something there. And thankfully, Chloe actually has something like that. While I will be harsh in my critiques, I like to think that I can be fair. When I first played Life is Strange, I can admit the time-traveling aspect was an interesting concept, and learning that Max and Chloe were old friends, the former saving the latter, it was a good enough hook that wanted me to see where this would go. The problem is, it didn't go too far before it fell off a cliff. As I stated before, the big problem with Chloe is that the game expected me to like her, but throughout the narrative, I only found more and more reasons to dislike her. Let's discuss those reasons, shall we? One of the earlier examples that I actually found intriguing was when you're in Chloe's room, and you attempt to have Max hide from David, Chloe's stepfather.
One of my guns is missing. Did you take it?
Oh god, I didn't take your stupid gun. You do know I believe in gun control?
Wait, is that grass? You been token up again in here?
Oh yeah, guns, weed. You were tripping balls.
I'm sick of your disrespect. Tell me the truth. That's an order.
From the interaction, I can understand why Chloe would have an issue with her stepfather.
Little.
Fuck you, pig!
Listen. You asked for that. You know exactly what you're doing.
You are so pathetic.
So the guy can be abusive, and my first thought was, I can see why Chloe is the way she is because of her home life. That's good. Then the magical time powers got me curious to check something.
I'm Price. Chloe Price. Bang!
Look, I'm going to be upfront. While I can understand Chloe's hatred of David and how he can be a bastard in this is not a good flag for me to like Chloe, since David was right to suspect her. Oh, and I'd be remiss if I didn't bring up this lovely touch of irony.
Down.
Chillax, sister. That's not even loaded. Yet.
I thought you believed in gun control.
Yes, I believe I should control the gun. It's the men who need to be checked. Jesus, I shot myself! Ugh!
As an additional note, you can also not see the slap. It's a determinant factor and one that isn't set in stone through every gameplay. So, technically speaking, a player can miss the action and possibly not see what happens. Now, this is not a bad thing, but it's also something that kind of makes it harder for me to actually like Chloe in one regard. Now, character faults are a thing in literature. They are a means of allowing the audience to connect to characters on deeper levels as we can see a bit of ourselves in the character. Because, last time I checked, we're not perfect beings. Chloe's cockiness and being a liar are character faults, not a weakness in the writing. However, when there are numerous character faults in a singular character, then you run the risk of overstuffing your character and basically running into a disaster. Let's get back to the weed situation as a proper example, since if you allow Chloe to take the blame for her own drugs in her room, you get this scene later down the line.
We're both already in so much trouble.
You can always let me get busted like you did with the weed.
Chloe, that was your weed in your room, and you told Max to find a place to hide. Not to mention, there was this line.
He would have been a bigger dick if he caught you in here.
So, expecting responsibility on Max and saying something like this raised the asshole flag to me. Now, let's focus on the relationship that Chloe has with Max.
So we should figure out how to best use and abuse your power with a test.
After Max demonstrates her powers to Chloe in one of the most redundant ways I've seen in games for a long time, Max gets a phone call from one of her other friends, Kate Marsh. For context, Kate was recently drugged, and there was an internet video of her posted that was at the very least scandalous. She's been being made fun of for quite a long time, and is not doing too well. Now, one would think something like this isn't a big issue. Friends answer phone calls all the time when hanging out with other friends, but...
It's Kate Marsh from Blackwell.
Big whoop. You don't call me once in 5 years and now you're all over some biatch you see every day at school? I see how you roll. So go ahead, chat up Kate Marsh from Blackwell. I've got other people to hang out with too.
I'm sorry? Why is this a big deal? Not like you can't answer the phone and walk outside the restaurant at the same time. Chloe, I don't know if you're aware of this, but humans are capable of doing more than one thing at a time. Now, this is a small detail, but one that really speaks a bit more about Chloe's character, especially when we consider other actions that really turned me away from her character. For a little more background, the reason that Chloe wants to use Max's powers is to find her friend, Rachel Amber, the MacGuffin of the game. At least until... But that's fine. As itself, it's a fine motivation. The problems crop up when Chloe continuously wants to use Max's powers, which when you consider that there's a scene where Max gets a nosebleed and passes out after using her rewind powers a little too much, you'd think that ring up some warning bells within Chloe's brain that maybe using these powers in excess wouldn't be a good idea. But nope! Throughout the story, Chloe is ready and willing to abuse Max's powers. And to top it off, and I know this is probably a meme at this point, but the fact that you have to constantly save Chloe from some of the dumbest deaths imaginable does not help. For example, the train tracks. Everyone and their mother calls this a stupid move, and I can't give Max any leeway here, since she could have attempted to rewind time back before the two laid down on the tracks. Then again, what do I expect from someone who likes Final Fantasy Spirits Within?
Maybe I could sneak in and watch Final Fantasy Spirits Within. I don't care what anybody says, that's one of the best sci-fi films ever made.
You make me sick!
I think I've shown that I really don't like Chloe, and that's a shame because the game is honestly focused on the relationship between Max and Chloe. So if I dislike one of the members of this dynamic duo, and that's the main focus of the game, well, 2 plus 2 doesn't equal fish for a reason. I'm not going to go through every part of why I dislike Chloe, but there are a few other points I want to bring up that I feel are important for this discussion. So in Chapter 3, we get a confrontation between David and Chloe. It's getting pretty heated, and well, the best way to describe it is just to see the scene itself.
No, you and Chloe think you know more than anybody, like all teenagers.
Leave Max alone, David. Stop threatening students.
He threatens them with surveillance cameras, so he can spy on everybody. Like he spies on all of us here.
Don't start, Chloe. Not now.
Yeah, I'm just always starting shit, right? You're a total paranoid.
One of my guns is missing. Did you take it?
Oh god, I didn't take your stupid gun.
Down.
Chillax, sister. It's not even loaded.
Obviously, this movie has its head up its own anus.
You used to call me a loser for getting kicked out of Blackwell. So who's the loser now, David? Who haven't you accused or harassed? Between your investigations into Rachel and Kate, what have you done besides get in trouble?
Now, you can side with either Chloe or David here, and it's here I have to explain something about myself. I don't consider myself to be a too confrontational person in real life. I usually tend to want to listen to both sides of an argument, and I kinda get annoyed when one side doesn't want to hear out the other side and makes things worse on their own assumptions on the other side. Throwing the fact that this scene is in the game,
I don't want to fight with you anymore. I don't want to fight with anyone anymore.
I at least want to hear David out. And what happens when I want to try to be a bit more negotiable in this sense?
Thanks for letting me down again, Max. Why can't you just rewind so I don't have to see you defending that asshole?
You know, I gotta say that this is really rich coming from Chloe. I don't know if it's because I'm an old man at this point yelling at kids to get off his lawn, but honestly, I can see both David and Chloe being in the wrong and in the right here. Both have good intentions, but both are doing what they are doing in messed up ways. To provide a little more context, earlier we had to break into a school office and look at documents that weren't for our eyes. Stuff like private records, you know, breaking the law. It's quite hypocritical for Chloe to go on this tangent when she's no better. And may I remind you, I am well aware that people like Chloe, but please see it from my perspective that we've got a character who's willing to use their friend for their own means to the point where it hurts her, happens to be rude, steals firearms and lies about it, is willing to steal from the handicap fund, yes, that's a thing, sees herself as the center of the universe and is a massive hypocrite. Please, tell me why I'm supposed to like this character. I understand that these are faults and are character driven, but when you have so many unlikable characteristics on a character, it greatly overshadows any actual good that the character may have to them. What's worse is this line.
Grow up! God, you're not the only one in Arcadia Bay with problems.
Oh, hey! Max finally found her spine and is actually calling out Chloe. And then...
Gotta blame somebody, otherwise it's all my fault. Fuck that.
My god. They're not wearing seatbelts. This comes after the realization of learning some facts about Rachel Amber and Chloe's drug dealer. Which, By the way, the two broke into the guy's trailer in order to get that information, so... Yay! More illegal activity! How's that pistol up there, Chloe?
I shouldn't be up here.
To be fair, I understand where Chloe's coming from with her emotions being all whack. After all, part of the reason why she's acting like this is how her father passed away in an accident right before Max moved away from Arcadia Bay. Losing your father and having your best friend disappear around the same time can be a tough experience. I should know, I've actually experienced something similar. There's a problem though. This apparently has been going on for 5 years. And from what I've seen in the prequel Before the Storm, well, let's just say I don't really have a lot of empathy for Chloe after that. Now, we get to one of the worst parts about this game. Remember when I went on that tirade about how Max was able to travel back in time by looking through photos?
So you know, Jeff, you were not creating 6 different timelines.
Of course I am, Abed.
Yeah, she does exactly that. Max prevents Chloe's father from dying in a car accident. And when Max returns, she finds that Chloe is now crippled. What?! Oh boy, this is some level of... Funnily enough, this version of Chloe is actually pretty empathetic. I mean, aside from asking Max to help her commit seppuku, she's actually thinking more about her family and how her condition is a burden to them. But the problem is, the writers had to cripple Chloe for me to like her as a character. And I need to stress, I empathize with this Chloe, not Blue Chloe, who's willing to throw anyone under the bus for her problems. If anything, this actually accentuates how unlikable Blue Chloe is.
Hello? I hate that word, no offense.
I don't know if I have to say this, but I don't think this sort of writing is all that strong, especially when this is really kind of pointless. After all, Max goes back to the original timeline after she kills Chloe. Yeah, that's a thing. So what was the point of this? To demonstrate that Max's powers have consequences? That's kind of been being beaten into my head throughout this entire game. My god, I've done about 6 pages about this. I need to move on. There's 2 more instances I want to discuss, and then we'll move on to the next portion of the video essay. So after some tomfuckery in the plot, Max goes back in time in order to prevent Chloe from dying.
You gotta be fucking kidding.
I'm being a little bit vague since while I dislike the twists in the story, I'm not going to spoil everything about it. Max goes back in time via a photo in order to convince Chloe from going to where they think the culprit is, because Chloe gets killed because of it.
Chloe, wait, listen. I can walk and listen, okay?
But calling a friend and walking? Oh, that's just an affront to my pride. Anyway, during this sequence, Max has to try to convince Chloe from not leaving in order to make sure she doesn't die.
That fucker is already dead? How do you know that?
Chloe, Max has time powers. Did you forget that?
Jesus, I shot myself!
And you have to convince Chloe that going to this location is a bad idea, even after telling Chloe that the things get effed up if you go. She still wants to go. I'm sorry, but this just makes me question if Chloe has the memory of a goldfish. If a friend who has the ability to travel through time has used said ability multiple times, especially to save you, and is telling you straight up, hey, this is a bad idea, maybe, just maybe, you should listen? This conversation is basically Max telling Chloe that she has time powers and that you should listen to someone who has time powers so you don't die. The sad part is, I don't think Chloe is being an idiot here. Not in the way of Alex of Yick, who had the inability to read a cover of a record label before wasting my time for an hour and a half.
Ah, yes. The Mystical Ultima LP Legend by Vela Wild.
Did you say Vela Wild?
Yeah. But didn't you know this already? It's on the cover. Did you even read it?
No, I get that Chloe is emotional. I get that emotions drive you to do these stupid things. But after everything that has happened in the span of a week, I just find this to be extremely stupid. Now, after all that, what is my point? I think I've already explained this, but despite the game doing a lot of things that made me personally dislike Chloe as a character and maybe someone I'd rather not meet never in real life, the game expects me to like her, to care about her. Perhaps maybe I'm the minority in this, because when you look at forums or YouTube videos of the mountains of awards this game got, people praise this character and the relationship. There's a scene near the end of the game where sort of a inner demon of Max confronts regular Max.
Who are you? Holy shit, are you serial? I'm you, dumbass.
And I like this. It's actually calling out this relationship that the story is trying to convince me is great. But it gets kneecapped with an imaginary Chloe coming in and saying,
Dude, do not even fuck with her head. She knows what we went through together this week, and you don't. There's no way you can break up our team. This is reality.
Gee, that completely negates whatever inner demons Max said, Chloe. You are SMRT. Thanks for the golden opportunity, interesting writing, and throwing it out the window, don't nod. So since I've gone through all this, I think it's important that we talk about why Chloe doesn't work for me as a character. The story itself is trying to convince me that the relationship between Max and Chloe is a good thing, that it's worth saving, as demonstrated by all the times that Max goes back in time to save Chloe. But that flies in the face of how Chloe treats Max, from abusing her powers, to not trusting her, to even guilt-tripping if you disagree with Chloe even a little bit, even on the smallest of things. This, to me, is what a toxic relationship is, and it's utterly baffling that Max would want to continue this friendship with someone like this. Throw in the fact that the story ends with a single binary choice, one that contradicts the whole aspect of your choices matter. Well, let's just say it wasn't a hard decision for me.
I think that Chloe is a compelling character because she's pretty wounded in lots of ways. She's gone through a lot of things.
There's something so relatable about Chloe, and I think that's why so many people love her. It's because we all have something in us or something about her that we either want to be or already have.
I'm sorry, but when a character acts like this in a story that's trying to convince me that it's okay to treat your friends like this, even going so far as to attempt to make me sympathetic with a character by crippling her, I don't think that's what makes a compelling character. That makes a character that is designed to be hated, but expected to be liked? And this is true, the game needs me to care for Chloe, because the single binary choice that can render everything you've done obsolete is dependent on the players liking Chloe. And I'm sure a lot of people do like her. I mean, one look online with all the fan art of the character is enough to tell me that people have a thing for her. But I'm sorry, I cannot bring myself to like a character who does all of this and has an attitude like that. Even if I can find some relatable stuff to the character, it just doesn't work for me. So, since I've explained how a hateable character doesn't work, is it possible to make a character work like that in a story? Well, obviously that's possible. I gave plenty of examples of that earlier. But for the sake of continuing a trend with games that are getting a third entry soon, let's talk about something different in this regard. No More Heroes is an adventure hack-and-slash game written, directed, and designed in 2007 by Suda51. You might be familiar with him with other such titles such as Killer 7 and Lollipop Chainsaw.
Don't worry about the smell. I just shit myself.
But it was No More Heroes that really put Suda51 on the map, especially in the West. It's a bit of a similar story to that of Don't Nod when they made Life is Strange, and how that game was really the first that allowed the company to take off. Answered all the comments that I dare to compare the two. But what is No More Heroes about, and how does it work in creating an effective Jackass character? Well, we have to look towards the main character, Travis Touchdown. To put it simply, Travis is what you call an otaku, a person who is obsessed with computers or particular aspects of popular culture to the detriment of their social skills.
Fuckhead!
Basically weebs. Travis is what a lot of people would consider an otaku to be like. He is unemployed, he's got a vast collection of anime figures, he winks off to anime, oh, and he kills people to make his living. By all accounts, this is a character that the audience shouldn't like due to his personality traits and role. Throw in the fact that Travis's goal in killing all these people is, well...
Okay, how about this? If I become #1, will you do it with me?
Yep! My god, you've got some thirst going on here if you're willing to kill the tap that. Guys, killing the tap that ass is never right. So from that description, Travis sounds like a character that isn't the best person around. Hell, fun fact, Travis was actually designed after Johnny Knoxville, the Jackass of fame. And from what I understand, this video itself was what Suda showed his team in order to inspire them for Travis's character and design. Chest-biting gators aside, we have the grounds of a character who, for all intents and purposes, should just be annoying and unlikable as Chloe. Both characters are representations of social archetypes that are seen, so by all accounts, Travis should be just as bad as Chloe, right? Wrong! You see, unlike Chloe, there's this one thing that Travis has. Development. Now, to explain some stuff about No More Heroes so you're up to speed, Travis Touchdown joined the United Assassins Association, or the UAA, to become the #1 assassin because... well, as he puts it,
I want to be #1. How's that? Short and simple enough for you? It's gonna be a long, hard road. But who knows? Could kick ass. Could be dangerous. Could totally suck. What do you say, bro? Join me. Let's see how far we can take this. And for you there holding the controller right now, just press the A button. Let the bloodshed begin.
And this is where the development comes into play. You see, unlike Life is Strange with its narrative-driven gameplay, No More Heroes doesn't have the whole "your choices matter," but not really effect, so it has to rely on a linear narrative structure. So whenever we get scenes with Travis interacting with the other cast, we're no longer in the reins of Travis. We're watching Travis, much like how we watch Chloe's actions. What we are seeing is how Travis reacts to the top assassins that he fights, and in those interactions we can get a grasp of Travis's character. Take for example the tutorial boss, Death Metal.
Hey, you know what paradise is, right?
Paradise.
This is paradise, the place where dreams are fulfilled. Well, you've had your dream, old man. Time to wake up.
This is no paradise.
All right, then what is it?
A place to die.
Huh. I'm glad you and I are on the same page here.
Aside from the preamble cutscene, this is the first time we actually get to see Travis's character. And from what we're shown, he's, well...
arrogant, crude little shit.
Couldn't say it better myself. Because of the style of writing, players would be able to see Travis's personality and how it clashes with the other assassins, with the first two bosses of the game, Death Metal and Dr. Peace, who isn't actually a doctor, he's a detective. Yeah, don't ask me why. With these two bosses, we see Travis's brash and crude side.
Thank you. Mighty kind of you.
Nice set of pipes you got there, old man.
It has always been my dream to perform in a stadium such as this. A gentleman from the association told me I could have any stage I wanted today. How could I refuse such a kind offer?
Courtesy of me and my entry fee, no doubt.
And yet, there's something to consider. If Travis really was so dead set on being #1 of assassins, why let these two characters spout off whatever they said? When you think of assassins, you don't think of this kind of behavior. After all, isn't it easier to kill someone when they aren't aware? It's just common sense, after all. But that's when a certain line drops.
Man! This is what I live for! Fighting your own kind. Nothing's more gratifying.
Fighting your own kind. I'm sorry, Travis, but assassins aren't typically so gung-ho about fighting. Anyone who's ever played a Hitman game can tell you that going in loud isn't the smartest way about this. And yet, here Travis is, fighting against these assassins, listening to them speak, and hell, allowing them to get ready to fight. One thing to note is that this is according to Sylvia, the spokeswoman of the UAA and the center of Travis's desires.
Perhaps you've forgotten, these fights are an official game. If your opponent dies for whatever reason, according to the rules of conduct, it is your win.
That's fucked up! That's the stupidest rule I've ever heard! This guy's mine, and you just want me to let him go?
I know that comes later in the game, but it really shows that Travis doesn't want an easy kill, and it's reflected in how he's willing to give his opponent what is essentially their final words. That actually says a lot about Travis when you think about it. When we get to the #8 assassin, Shinobu, there's a few interesting lines after we watch her kill her classmates.
You killed them?
Such a gentleman. Are you asking out of tactical curiosity? Or are you just fucking with me?
Bet they didn't offer much resistance.
You got a problem with that? You got no idea how hard it is to hide your true self around here.
Hey, I'm not accusing anybody.
This goes back to what I was saying. Travis had a clear shot to kill someone who is in his way to the top, but he doesn't take that opportunity to do so.
It's actually pretty hard to take cheap shots when your enemy is as bloodthirsty as yourself.
With this line, though, I suspect it has more to do with a form of respect. Sure, Travis can be crass and crude, but here's the thing, he doesn't want to kill someone without a fight. A more noble aspiration you would expect from someone who goes... Despite being a horrible person, we do see that Travis does have a code of honor, not unlike that of a samurai, so despite his crass nature, there are things that I like about Travis. Even more so when you realize that he still has a human side to him, as demonstrated that he does not take the life of Shinobu when he defeats her. It also gives a brief look at one of Travis's weaknesses, and his softer side. He doesn't have the heart to kill women, especially not young ones. Despite being a bloodthirsty killer, there are still things he holds sacred to a degree, at least in this point. Now, I'm not going to go over every ranked match because that would get redundant really quickly, but there are two more that I need to go over of them. One of them, number 6, is Holly Summers.
Do you like fighting?
Yep.
Do you like killing?
Live for it.
Do you like fear?
Can't say. Never felt it.
Do you accept death?
Death? Never crossed my mind.
Death is the only truth. You are still a mere butt.
That's not a good thing, you know. Seeking meaning in everything. Especially killing. That's a bad habit among smart little girls these days.
Come closer and you will understand everything.
I'm ready. Anywhere, anytime.
Just your ordinary assassin. Such a disappointment.
Are you in the mood yet? Normal assassins don't shoot the shit like this. They see their target and kill them!
At the beginning of the fight, we still see Travis being his brash self, showing him that this is pretty much just a game with sex at the end being his prize. But then, this happens.
This is not mercy. You can't kill a woman. Pathetic. If you can't kill a woman, you are less than a thug. You will never make it to the top. That's okay. I seem to have a thing for stupid, pathetic men like you. I can accept defeat if it comes from your hand. I will let you in on a secret. Assassins must die when they lose. Open your eyes and never look back. Promise, never forget me.
Huh?
Thank you. The moment you hesitated, I felt your embrace.
Hold up!
Academics like to fantasize too, you know.
Wait! Number 6! No! Forgive me, number 6. I never meant to shame you.
A single moment of hesitation was all it took for the players to see Travis's true nature. Yes, he spared Shinobu before, but there's where it gets serious. Holly berates Travis for failing to finish her off, and instead of using the opportunity to survive or attack Travis again, she pushes Travis to become a better assassin and accept the death of his opponents by blowing herself up. It is also the first time that Travis feels remorse or regret at the loss of life, giving her an improvised burial. He also regrets his weakness and inability to kill her properly, having shamed her by doing so. Now we see that Travis comes to a realization that this isn't just a game, that this is more than just a means of getting scratch and some action in bed. These are human lives that he's been taking.
Forgive me, number 6. I never meant to shame you.
You are now 6th in rank.
What was her name?
That is not important anymore.
You're right. But I owe her at least that.
And unfortunately, with how the UAA is formed, Travis is trapped in this situation. Because just like him going after higher assassins, there are lower ranks coming after him. So there's only one way to go, and that's to the top. After this fight, Travis shows no more mercy to his opponents. He can't run, so there's only one more thing to do. The last boss I'll talk about is the final one. Well, aside from the true final boss, but hey, spoilers ahead. During the rank 1 fight, we finally learn more about Travis's backstory.
I remember. It was a hot summer day. There was someone standing behind my father and mother. That person killed my parents. The face, I can't make it out. Who are you?
Remember.
Who are you?
Try harder.
I think I can see it. Almost.
Do you recognize the face?
Now I remember everything. You're right. I don't have a father. At least not anymore. You killed him, didn't you?
Yes. And that's why you became an assassin. To kill me.
Now I get it. All those fights. It was for this. I lost everything that I ever cared about. That bitch took everything.
I can help you to get even.
She's a good con artist, that's for sure. She set up some killer fights.
So you and I finally meet.
You should thank Sylvia.
Yeah, it's a lore dump, and one so blatant that even the game itself makes fun of.
Jean, there's just one thing I want to ask you. Who are you?
Me? You don't need to know. All of your trivial questions will be answered in the afterlife.
Answer me!
It's impossible.
Impossible? What do you mean?
It's too terrible. It alone would jack up the age rating of this game even further.
So what? Who cares?
What if the game gets delayed? You don't want this to become No More Heroes forever, do you?
All right. I'll fast forward this so you can tell me.
Okay. I'll make it short and quick. You are my half-brother. You know that manga called Miyuki? The Japanese one? Well, it's like that. Your father abandoned my mother to run off with your mother. It broke her heart beyond repair. She killed herself. Knowing I had nowhere to go, he took advantage of me. Ever since I can remember, he molested me. We lived in this rotten apartment, and I was his slave.
Yeah, Sue likes to have a few fourth wall breaking jokes here and there, but regardless of that, and the fact that the game itself is pretty obviously dumping on the whole last minute twist aspect, to make a fast forward story even shorter, Jean here is Travis's half-sister. Their father did some really shitty stuff to her, and she had the short end of the stick, even doing some things that would be too... Ugh. As you saw, Travis did lose his parents right in front of his eyes, but compared to Jean's life, that's not really that big of a deal, especially when you consider that Travis's lifestyle. Where aside from that one incident, Travis has been living rather comfortably. Jean did what she could do in order to survive, selling her body, killing people, all because her father was a monster. Travis? He gets to wank off the anime. And yet, there's something to this fight. The fight with Jean represents integrity, as opposed to the superficial desires for riches and glamour that death metal represented at the beginning of the game. Travis knows Jean had good reasons for what she did, but as a matter of principle, he must kill her. And she accepts it. Travis even wishes her well in the afterlife. Defeating Jean represents Travis accomplishing what he set out to do, even though in the end he still doesn't get the glamorous life he'd hoped for, and he just returns to his life in his small dingy apartment with his cat, playing video games and wanking off to anime. Now, I'm not claiming that No More Heroes has the greatest writing in the world. It certainly doesn't, especially when you compare it to the sequel where there's a big plot hole. But here's what it does great. It makes it so people aren't forced to like Travis. And in comparison to his sister's life, Travis is pretty much living a privileged existence. And yet, despite his flaws, people seem to really like the guy, when by all accounts he has flaws that are just as bad, if not worse than Chloe's. After all, the game itself is made to be enjoyed by people who Travis falls into. People who love anime-based games and can be obsessed with it and blood. No More Heroes lets the player shamelessly indulge in the sex and violence of it all, but it takes it to such an extreme that it also makes the player think about the violence-obsessed culture and their own lifestyle. But here's the rub. No More Heroes is a bit of a satire. It loves violence in games. It's not saying that the violence is bad, just that it's kind of sick. It's saying, yes, enjoy the violence, but acknowledge that some of the stuff we enjoy is kind of disturbing when you think about it. In turn, the game never asks you to like Travis. It never puts pressure on the players to think he's a good person. And yet, there is something that draws people to Travis. He has a moral code, and one that he sticks to. Like a modern-day samurai, Travis follows the code of Bushido. Courage, respect, integrity, duty, moe. These are words that can be used to describe Travis' touchdown. Travis never runs from a fight. He's always continuing forward. Despite his rude nature, Travis does hold respect for other assassins, even going so far as to allow them to speak their own monologues before the fights. Travis, throughout his journey, never uses underhanded tactics and is completely honest with his goals and motivations. When Travis starts his journey to the top, he continues on the path he's on. All the while, the game isn't expecting me to like Travis but to understand him, and to realize that while he does is bad, he still needs to do it because that's his goal. I'm sure at this point there's a prominent question in your guys' heads. Why compare Chloe and Travis? Especially considering the fact they're in completely different games, genres, and that I obviously have a bias here. Personally, these two characters are more alike than you think. Both have dead parents, both live in a society that disregards them, both have archetypes, punk and otakus, both of which are considered outcasts, and both are characters that people can relate to. Because despite what you may think, and since I actually don't like Chloe, I'd have to be an idiot to not realize there are people out there who do relate to the character. Hell, even I can see something relatable to her from me. She lost her father and, well, I really don't want to say it. As I stated, Life is Strange narrative has a dependence on the player finding the relationship between Max and Chloe as something to protect. No More Heroes doesn't have that same thing happening. It's not asking me to like Travis or try to make him out to be a better person than he actually is. If anything, I think Max and Chloe's relationship is more of an example of a toxic relationship between two characters. Now watch as so many people begin to write comments about how I cherry-picked scenes, or that I didn't read the book, or use whatever buzzwords in order to ignore this. Life is Strange is an interesting beast, because while I hate Chloe, and by extension the relationship between her and Max, there are things I do find interesting. I like how the story tackles subjects such as online harassment, lack of social acceptance, desperation, and depression. And for that I applaud in doing so in a way that is tasteful of our manner, especially for its teenage audience. Hell, while I may have issues with how Don't Nod play fast and loose with the game's time travel mechanics, I will say it's a fascinating idea, especially for this genre of games. But what makes it hard for me to say that I like the game is that the game expects me to like Chloe, which sucks, because there's stuff about Chloe that I do admit that I can like and relate to, but because she doesn't have any actual growth in the story and practically remains the same throughout it, it makes it hard for me to see her as a good character. Travis, on the other hand, doesn't have that issue, because while he's still unlikable throughout the story, he at least grows and learns from what he kills. I don't know, I guess I'm just some dude on the internet who apparently likes making people mad about things whenever he expresses an opinion. But in any case, in my eyes, I see Chloe as a character I am supposed to like because of the story, but I can't because of how she's written and how she interacts with Max. Still, I can admit I'm just a guy, a person, I have my own fallacies and biases, and I'm not saying that what you just watched is fact, but what I just feel. I'm not saying Life is Strange is totally trash, it's a product of its time, but I could say the same thing about No More Heroes. While I don't agree with that statement, some people have told me the game treats women way too poorly. Then again, the guys tend to get just as gruesome deaths and such. Still, I won't berate people who like Chloe. I understand that she can be likable because of subjective taste, but to me she's the worst Jackass character type out there, where the story needs me to like her to be effective. Now if you excuse me, I'm gonna wait for No More Heroes 3 because that's something worth my time.
Let's do this. Start the game.
See, you two Nancy Drews.
And then I fired again, and then I missed, and then I fired, and then I fired, and I missed. I missed both times.
High school sucks. High school sucks. Back to the lab again. Oh no.
You know, when it comes to prequels and sequels, there's a bit of a stigma with them all, especially when it's a work that's already beloved.
Hello there.
Star Wars is probably the best example of this stigma, especially when we consider how contentious both the prequels and the sequels can be among its fans. Regardless of where you personally stand with these films, they themselves have been quite divisive. But why is that? Well, today I want to focus on prequels. And there's a lot that can make prequels bad, but can that be applied to video games? Well, duh, you've read the title. You know exactly what two prequels I'm talking about. One of which I've already talked about in depth, which you can see here, and another which I talked about recently. The first is a game that we'll be talking about that is what I think is a bad prequel, to a game I already think is bad. So, not a long time ago, I talked about Life is Strange.
I thought you believed in gun control.
Yes, I believe I should control the gun. It's the men who need to be checked. Jesus, I shot myself! Ah, I shot myself! Back up! Back up!
And I talked about how Chloe was essentially a terrible character, and how despite the fact that the game and its developers clearly wanted me to like and care for Chloe, I just couldn't. But, as one would imagine, when you have an opinion on the internet, you'll get people who will, well...
It's funny because Life is Strange is
You know, an actually legitimate great game, so maybe you just have bad taste in interactive story games, because yeah, it absolutely is a great series. The first game especially.
Let's just say are special. But in my video, I acknowledged that while I didn't like Chloe, that there were a lot of people who do. And it's expected I got those fans that really make it hard to really respect the series. Funny thing about those kinds of fans is that despite the whole theme that underlies Life is Strange, that you should be open to other people and be open-minded, that these people clearly don't have that mindset. Oh well. Enough of dealing with the sadness. Let's talk about Life is Strange Before the Storm. Well, the prequel is an interesting beast, and unfortunately it's a game that I feel has the biggest issues that one can have when it comes to writing a prequel to an already established story. So yes, the manga common man is being negative again to the popular game series, and yes, I do plan on covering the sequel to Life is Strange later down the line this year.
Everything is political, Sean.
Don't worry, Mr. Amber. I can tell that my progressive attitude is not welcome in this house.
So what is Before the Storm? Well, the premise is that we learn more about Chloe Price and Rachel Amber's relationship. And for those who are coming from my previous video and don't know, Rachel Amber was the friend that was the main source of the mystery for that game.
Whoa!
How's this for handy?
Basically, she was the battery that powered the story and acted as the motivation for Chloe, and in turn acted as the motivation for Max to want to help Chloe. Now, to point out some things, since it's the elephant in the room, one of the biggest weaknesses for this game is that it's a prequel story. Because if you actually played the first game in full or watched it on YouTube, you would know where this story is going and you know what's going to happen to these characters. So when you get a scene like this, it loses any actual gravity to it. Also, I warned you all that there would be spoilers, that's what the disclaimer was for in the beginning, so no complaining.
No complaining.
Because in the first game, we learned that Rachel was killed by a teacher named Jefferson, and I know I'm going against what I said in my first video about not talking about the whole ending, but since it's more focused on the story as a whole this time around, I feel like I need to justify it. Also, Jefferson as the main baddie was such a terrible twist that I honestly don't feel bad for spoiling it. Now, what was I saying?
Diabetes.
Oh, right. Let me say this. Just because we know the destination, that doesn't mean the journey itself can't be entertaining. After all, prequels aren't really about the end result. They exist to help flesh out the backstory and act as how it came to happen. I recently discussed Yakuza 0, a game that you guys should really check out, and it too is a prequel story for the rest of the Yakuza series. And I'll talk more in depth on that in the second half of this video. But Yakuza 0, despite having the same weaknesses of Before the Storm, still has other factors that can help cover its weakness. Gameplay, mini-games, and a gripping narrative that opens up a backstory for two characters that are really essential for the entire series. Before the Storm, however, has to rely on its characters and narrative in order to carry it, and unfortunately, in my eyes, it doesn't do a good job with that. But I want to make it clear that I'm not judging the game for simply being a prequel. I'm judging it based on its stories and characters, with the premise being in the background. And this is something that the fans apparently wanted, to see the relationship between Chloe and Rachel. So, let's see how well this turned out.
I'm headed out.
How do we begin this harrowing tale? Oh, right. I should point out there was a bonus episode put out that shows a little bit of Max and Chloe before Chloe's dad dies, with Max making a tape that says, "Sorry." Unfortunately, that didn't happen. Some people have told me this explains this scene.
You don't call me once in 5 years and now you're all over some biatch you see every day at school? I see how you roll. So go ahead, chat up Kate Marsh from Blackwell. I've got other people to hang out with too.
You're a cunt. You're a cunt. Stan says you're a cunt.
And while I can see how you would think that, this opens up a few other holes, like, if we have such a promise to Chloe, why didn't Max actually contact Chloe? There's no actual scene that explains this in the entire game. Not a good sign if your game, which is designed to flesh out the backstory of your characters, ends up making more questions than answers. But to be fair, this wasn't something that was part of the initial release, so unfortunately for me, I had the ability of foresight here. No. What we actually start is...
I like trains.
That's a little bit of a fun twist, but we actually start with Chloe trying to get into a Firewalk concert, and... Look, I get that Life is Strange was cited to get inspiration from Twin Peaks, but even a reference like that is a bit too much. Ugh.
You gotta let me in. Check it. I'm totally legit.
Hey, this is a tuna fishing license.
But we finally get to the actual gameplay.
Ugh, come on. What
A girl like you
with
with
pretty flowers on her bicycle playground to me.
Is your boss your mom?
Follow up. Don't care. Do you live in your boss's basement?
You could have a
hurt your
flamethrower,
feelings.
an army of
Are you
robot
going to
ninjas,
go
and a
home now?
So we went from time manipulation to talking smack. Alright, normally this isn't a big deal, cause I'm not expecting Chloe to develop some sort of superpowers in the past and suddenly forget it in time for the main game. But this mechanic is just not doing it for me. Not only because does it not really play to the same strength as Max's time manipulation in this type of game, but also...
You with pretty flowers on her bicycle.
Don't get me wrong, this falls into Chloe's character, I guess, but this...
You're sorry? You just looked at my tits.
Am I dead yet? Just doesn't have the same bite as you would expect. The wiki for this game describes the backtalk mechanic as follows. Backtalk has Chloe use her wits to throw insults back at the other characters or cleverly try to change their perspective. Backtalk is optional, and even if you fail a sequence, you can just find another method or route. Cleverly, huh? If I can jump to a different game series that has a similar back and forth idea, Ace Attorney, and specifically Ace Attorney Investigations did this quite nicely. I don't know, maybe it's a bit too much to compare, but it's my video and I'm gonna do it anyway. Considering that both games are based upon narrative aspects, their main characters have to use their words to fight against other people, and both games need to look for verbal cues in their opposition to capitalize on. I think it's more than appropriate to make the comparison. So when you look at someone like Miles Edgeworth, he too has to look for the right words in order to expose those lies that others are telling, and take advantage over the argument with not only logic, but also evidence. And even more so when we get to the sequel title, which unfortunately we didn't get in the West, so say for a fan translation, but... we get access to a mechanic that's more similar to Chloe's backtalk, logic chess, which requires you to carefully select when and what to say against opponents. Sure, he's not actively insulting his opponents, but at least there's a bit more bite to it. Like, a number of the backtalk scenes don't really have anything other than the ambience music to them. I'm not saying that Chloe has to yell objection, although that certainly would make me think a little lighter of her character. No. I think the thing that makes this mechanic not be as impactful as it should be is the lack of any actual music, which, can I say, I actually like the music in Life is Strange. It's nothing that I'd listen to while working out, but it does have a few catchy tunes here and there. And honestly, something like this could have gotten me more interested in the talkback mechanic. After all, if you're going to go with something more mundane, you might as well put a little style for it, and oddly enough, Life is Strange does have a few good aesthetics to it. For example, going back to Miles Edgeworth, not only do they have the logic chess take place in Edgeworth's imagination to help him focus, but the music as well helps add to the situation. And that happens within the regular gameplay of Ace Attorney Investigations. But regardless of my complaints, without having to do with some more retconning, this is probably the best thing to add to the actual gameplay that is in line with Chloe's character, for better or worse. Because at this point, the mechanic essentially boils down to, how much of an asshole can Chloe be? With insults that are so paltry that I'm even embarrassed to know Chloe for. Now that we've actually tanked the watch time of this video while going over the mechanics of the game, let's actually take a few moments and check out the concert. Maybe check out the merch.
No shit. This car could slide down any minute. Releasing that brake would roll the car right out from under that tool. Do I want a Firewalk shirt that bad? I think I do. Sorry, dude. Maybe you shouldn't overcharge.
Shit! No, 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 no! Come on!
Thanks for playing, Dick.
That was probably pretty dumb, huh?
Alright, so that seems a little much. Glad to know that going to extremes are still in Chloe's bags of tricks.
That guy's a dick.
Yeah, what a dick. Trying to make some money while selling merchandise. Might as well cause a ton of property damage that's probably going to cost more than $20. And to be fair, after this, you are given the choice of stealing $200 from this guy while he's distracted. I mean, he's not the handicap, but I'm at least glad that Chloe is at least not willing to dive headfirst in the territory of terrible yet.
Ryan, look out! Pompidou! you!
Edginess maybe, but here... Heck, depending on the player, when you bump into someone, you can actually apologize for spilling their beer on them. But here's where we get to the point where I need to complain again. And after such a long time... Hadouken! One of the biggest complaints you could have in modern day adventure games is that your choices don't really matter. And Life is Strange was no stranger to this sort of complaint. After all, with the infamous final binary choice...
Nobody would ever even miss your punk ass, would they?
Get that gun away from me, psycho!
Your choices don't matter.
But when it comes to the prequel, this opens up more problems, and we'll get to them more when we get to the next backtalk section, cause yeah, that's a big problem. For now though...
Fuck. Hey, you okay?
I'm fine.
Relax. You bumped into me, remember?
So, why do we even have these choices?
Hear that? We have options!
Even if you apologize to the guy, Chloe will still get confronted by him and his friend, and threatened for spilling a beer. Seems a little much, but okay. Since this is the incident where Rachel has to come in and save... God, what was with people's hair in the 2000s? In any case, regardless of your choices, this event will still happen. So it makes me question why we even need this choice in the first place. Why give us the illusion of choice if the options still bring us to this point? And ultimately, this is patently bullshit.
What the hell?
And not just because of the usual foul Telltale style. And as a side note, that's why I was referring to my previous video on the subject. Telltale was famous for the having your choices matter but not really aspect to their games. But this also refers to the railroading and leads to one of the biggest issues with this story being a prequel, because the game itself has to be set for the mainline game, lest you get things like continuity errors. And we're about to get into why in the next section, but for the sake of giving context, after saving Chloe, she and Rachel danced the night away with some really awkward mocapping. While I said that just because this game is a prequel doesn't affect my thoughts of the game, the fact that this is a prequel will affect the game itself, especially with the lie that was the whole, your choices matter, because ultimately, in this game, they don't. And before you hand-wave away that saying that the narrative matters, well, if that's the case, why even bother putting these in? Why bother making this a game in the first place? If you just want to focus on the narrative, why not just make a movie, since that's practically what Life is Strange is? An interactive movie.
You take that back!
Don't just hand-wave away these choices when they were put into the game, because they were a conscious decision. Rants aside, we know the fates of Chloe and Rachel, and attempting to actually give the player some level of choice doesn't work with prequels, since if you do things that go outside the pre-established development characters, it leads to more questions than actual answers. Like, take for example the second backtalk session you have, this time with David. You know David, right?
I will remember this conversation.
Well, not really.
In Before the Storm, David is simply dating Chloe's mother. And in the morning after the concert, David tries to talk to Chloe, after probably the most awkward fist bump I've ever seen.
The most patient man in the world. Please, Chloe! Please!
I don't normally use this word, but cringe. But here are two things to consider with the backtalk with David. First, if you choose to go along with it, but you somehow fail...
Bad you don't know who you're dealing with here.
You can't threaten me. You know how I know? Because you just tried, and you.
Won't stand for your disrespectful mouth. Regard for authority unites us, gives us dignity, and we are better united than divided. Joyce, your mother, she's hurting, Chloe. Hurting for you. You've had it rough, no doubt about it. But all this staying out late, ignoring her command, drinking, drug use, it's making everything harder for her. You need to shape up, get your act together, and put someone else first for a damn change. Am I making myself clear?
Is it crazy if part of what David's saying makes sense to me? Got it. Thanks. We should really get going.
To point this out, you get the same speech if you don't enact the backtalk mechanic. But to get to the real meat of the situation, you can see that David is expressing his concern for not only Joyce but also Chloe, whose rampant behavior is causing her mother harm and distress. But should you enact the backtalk mechanic,
breaking her heart.
At least she has a heart. All you have is... What's it called when you've got 1 porn stash and 0 game?
Ooh.
Do I come to your place of employment and... Oh, that's right. You don't have one.
Kill me now.
If you were a man,
It's cool. If you were a man, I wouldn't go so easy on you either.
I hate you.
Are you fucking kidding me? Let me get this straight. This new gameplay mechanic that basically puts Chloe into the asshole corner covers up any actual characterization for other characters? I'm sorry, but when Chloe is being the aggressor here, you'll have to forgive me when I don't see David as the big bad guy when he was made out to be. What was Chloe's reasoning for why she didn't like David again?
You do realize I hate your boyfriend with every fiber of my being, right?
Chloe, you don't hate him.
He calls me girly. He's a dickhole.
Oh no, what a horrible monster. Better make the situation much worse by being overly aggressive. Sorry, but I kinda need more of a reason to hate this version of David. Someone who is actively trying to make things better in Chloe's life at this point in time. You know, I find it funny that people think I found it justifiable that David hits Chloe in my original video. That's not hyperbole. People actually said that. See? When have you actually bothered to listen to what I said in my video? While I can understand Chloe's hatred of David and how he can be a bastard in this is not a good flag for me to like Chloe, since David was right to suspect her. I never excused that. I condemned that. But I also found reason to dislike Chloe in that same scene, since David's suspicions of her stealing a gun were correct. It's fans like this who help contribute to my disdain for these games and fandoms, since they're actively projecting their own behavior onto those who have problems with the game. So let me spell it out clearly for people. David's slap is unwarranted. His remarks to Chloe in this game were hurtful and casually sexist.
Why do you women always take forever to get ready?
But people seem to forget scenes like these.
Who do you think your principal calls when you skip? Do you think I enjoy lying for you? Saying you're sick just so you don't get expelled? Between your grades and your disregard for my rules, I see you slipping. I'm worried.
But Mom, the whole point of lowering expectations is so you won't be disappointed in me. Never again.
Well, just look at all the f***s I give.
You're happy doing what you're doing? Fine. Keep at it. Just let me know so I can stop fighting with Blackwell to keep you on scholarship. Money's tight enough as it is.
This is actually a trend that I've noticed nowadays, that if you dare to even be a little open-minded towards one side in an argument, that you're automatically a bad person for trying to get to the other side of a story. Yes, Chloe has had a harsh life, but that doesn't excuse her actions that put her mother into stressful situations, all the while doing things that make her worry. Drugs, staying out late, not bothering to text when she's out late, and who knows what else. And David is just trying to help Chloe and by extension, Joyce. Which, by Chloe's own admission...
Is it crazy if part of what David's saying makes sense to me?
Hell, later in the game we learn more about David's backstory where we learn that he suffers from a form of PTSD.
He died, and I didn't. And I think about that fact every damn day. The point is, I've had my share of grief. I know what you're going through. So I guess what I'm saying is, I'm here to do whatever I can to help you get over the loss of your dad.
I missed the part where that's my problem.
Please, I'm begging you. Give David a chance, won't you?
Fuck you! Here. Why don't you keep this photo for a little while? Think about what I've said.
Now, obviously, you can reject this photo, but I do want to point out two things. The first being, 90% of players chose this option. So, not only did a ton of people that find David's backstory was sympathetic to a degree, but there was an overwhelming majority who did. The second thing is, David is actively trying to help Chloe. And with this context in mind, it really makes it harder for me to actually like Chloe when she's actively attempting to push others away or outright attack them. Chloe is wasting a scholarship and her mother is working her ass off to support her. And I'm supposed to like this character?
Well, fuck that.
I do have a big point, but there's one more thing I need to point out. Yes, Chloe is a teenager. Yes, she is in pain because of her life. But so what? People will often point to this and go, this excuses her behavior. But I disagree with that, especially since the point we're talking about is how likable someone is. A fictional character at that, and especially on a personal level. Also, in Life is Strange, Chloe is 19 years old. You know, the age of an adult. Just because there's a reason, that somehow means any critique or complaints are null. That's not how that works. Not that any of this matters. You wanna know why? Because no matter what your choices are in this game, Chloe and David will still be at each other's throats in the original game.
The last person I would ever talk to about my dad is you.
Chloe.
Think it over for more than a minute. It's a basic courtesy, you know, when people offer to help.
You're out of your fucking mind.
I just threw open my mouth.
Even if you want David and Chloe to get along, it doesn't matter because the original game still exists, and your choices in this game do not affect it. And this isn't really the only other instance of this happening. A smaller example is when Chloe and Rachel are, well, I guess cementing their relationship. You're given an option to either kiss Rachel, tell her to get a tattoo, or get her bracelet. The last option makes no bloody sense, especially when you consider that in the episode 2 of the original game, one of the major factors of conflict between Chloe and Frank is that Frank has Rachel's bracelet.
That's a huge jump in logic in so many ways.
And don't give me the whole, well, it's more the narrative, the choices don't matter.
Rachel Amber is not just a hero to Chloe. She might not be a hero at all to Chloe. The player's decisions will play a big role in determining exactly what their relationship is like and what kind of an impact Rachel's gonna have on her.
I fail to see the logic here.
This is the lead writer for the game, so I'm sorry, but if the lead writer points out that choices actually do matter, then I'm going to take them at their word and judge the story that they put forward. So do you see why a prequel for this kind of game doesn't work? In games that have you make choices in order to progress the story, prequels don't work unless they're heavily planned in advance and could somehow affect the outcome of the original game. Not only would it be a terrible thing to reprogram, but also would not be possible to do when the prequel was being made, since there was a voice actor strike going on, and would have a very big dissonance between the pre-established voice actors and the replacements. So while I'm not judging the game because it's a prequel, I'm judging the game because of its inability to work as a prequel and inability to work with the original game. It raises more questions about the characters than it actually will show, and it ultimately makes any and all choices in the game inconsequential. What's the point of trying to understand Joyce and David if Chloe's still going to be a jackass to them in the future? Speaking of judging... oh boy, oh boy, oh boy. Rachel Amber.
Rachel.
You know, funny story, in my comment section, I got a ton of people complaining about Rachel and how she was even worse than Chloe. And I'm actually in agreement.
Hey yo, what the fuck?
We need to consider two factors when it comes to Rachel, and that's the two relationship with Frank and Jefferson. So not only was she going behind Chloe's back and two-timing her with two guys, but it really makes it hard to like her as a character, especially considering what Before the Storm was trying to accomplish. To attempt to explain and flesh out the relationship between Chloe and Rachel, or at least attempt to. In the original game, Rachel was just a MacGuffin, and in this game, we're seeing why Rachel was special to Chloe. And because we're looking through the eyes of Chloe, we're seeing this through the eyes of a biased perspective. And I'd believe that if this was a flashback. This isn't really seeing things through the eyes of Chloe. This story has us sitting in the back seat, watching this incredibly rushed relationship blossom, because the entirety of Before the Storm takes place in the span of 3 to 5 days, if my math is correct. So, on the first night, we've got the two meetings, and on the second day, they hang out on the train, trying to learn more about each other, doing a dumb game where they spy on people.
And the Lord saideth, Thou shalt make a burnt offering of your firstborn son. Who are you talking to, Dad? No one, son.
The two steal some booze in one of the oddliest, creepiest animation I've seen this series so far. The fuck was that guy doing? And we get this scene.
I don't always drink beer, but when I do, I prefer drinking it next to an old toilet. Home run! Can I see? Sure. I asked you to leave me alone. Are you kidding me? I know you're the school princess and all, with the DA daddy and the perfect grades and all the perfect little Victoria chases kissing your perfect ass, but seriously? Fuck you. Great. I'm leaving. See you around, Chloe. You can't leave! Watch me. Rachel, wait! Don't go. Why not? Because I don't want to ruin this the way I ruin everything else in my life. And what is this exactly? I mean, fuck. Are you actually going to make me say it? Say what? Exactly. You know, like a friendship. But more. Ah, I know. Weird, right? It's just, today was the best day I've had since my dad died. And when I almost ruined it just now, the way I ruin everything, it made me realize whatever's going on between us is special. Come on, say something. Chloe, you know what? Forget it. This was really stupid. I mean, you're Rachel Amber, and I'm Chloe Price. It's not that!
Okay, I know at this point in time, Chloe doesn't know that the man the two spied on was Rachel's father, but this seems to be going a bit too fast!
No, I don't understand. You can't just turn on me for no reason. I'm sorry, turn on you? I guess I forgot. It's always about how you feel, isn't it? Sad Chloe's fucking sad again. Maybe you should try giving a shit about other people for once.
You two have only known each other personally for a day, yet these lines act like these two have been friends with each other for a while now, when it's hardly been a single day. I understand there was only 3 episodes to this game, but there's a reason why things called time skips are a thing. At least this would have been a bit more believable for this scene. It just feels really rushed to me. And the funny thing is, this could have been rectified if these two actually knew each other more personally before this whole situation. Like, maybe the two had seen each other at previous concerts and hung out afterwards a few times, steadily getting closer and maybe even having the butt of a friendship. You wouldn't even need to waste a lot of time with this. Maybe just have a bunch of photos of the two at different concerts and show it in Chloe's diary or something. At least then, I'd believe that the two had a bit more of a connection and it wouldn't feel so stiff and rushed. Like, here's a quick timeline of the events. You tell me that this doesn't seem like way too fast. Episode 1 has a lot of gaps where you could assume relationship and friendship was probably being fleshed out, but we didn't get to see it. Like, we still don't know why Rachel was at the mill and what she and Chloe did for the rest of that night. I'm sorry, but from what we're shown, it's hard for me to believe that these two would have had feelings for each other, regardless of teenage hormones. And even more so when they talk like they've known each other for a while.
I'm feeling everything that I'm feeling. It was the junkyard scene in episode 1 where Chloe is just like crying and beating on cars and things. And Phil had told me, as a motivation, he just said, "You can't be with someone you love anymore." And immediately that person popped into my head. And since then, it's just been holding on to the memory of who they are to me and how they feel in relation to me. That's been driving how I play Chloe for a lot of this.
That's all well and good, but Chloe loved Rachel? They only started really speaking to each other for barely a day! But, in any case, let's actually take a few moments and talk about Rachel, shall we? Well, I say a few moments, but I still got like about 8 pages left. Oh dear God. What did the lead writer have to say about Rachel Amber?
Imperfection is something that we embrace with this story, for sure. Rachel Amber has a power and a charisma and a meaning to Chloe that is, you know from the first game if you played it, incredible. We don't know for sure that it's purely good. We hope with the story in Before the Storm to raise this question of, it can be amazing to meet a person who has that power. It's not necessarily a good thing all the time either, because people are inherently complex. Rachel Amber is not just a hero to Chloe. She might not be a hero at all to Chloe. The player's decisions will play a big role in determining exactly what their relationship is like and what kind of an impact Rachel's gonna have on her.
That she might not be a hero at all. Well, that's straight up wrong. So let me tell you guys straight. I don't like Rachel Amber as a character. I find her to be a selfish little brat that the story is actively trying to look good and sympathetic.
She might not be a hero at all to Chloe.
Really? Because the story certainly doesn't want to make it that way, despite the symbolic imagery. The game doesn't necessarily want you to like Rachel, but it casts a positive spotlight on her because we are apparently seeing the story through the perspective of Chloe. But of course, the players aren't Chloe, so we see Rachel's flaws. She is self-centered, she is selfish, she's ungrateful. I think you get the damn point. But why do I think this? Well, there are 3 scenes I want to cover that highlight this. There are a number of them, but for the sake of time, we won't go over everything. For the first scene, we need to establish a little bit of context. On the first day of the second episode, after a blatant recap from Chloe, depending on your choices, you can either get Chloe expelled or suspended for the rest of the year. And said choice also affects the event I want to talk about. You see, depending on your choices in that meeting, Rachel will either be in the play or will not be in it. And depending on what the choice is, there will be 2 scenarios with the same outcome. The first scenario has a character named Victoria, a girl from the main title who was your stereotypical popular bitch, who oddly enough got a bit more character development than Chloe did in that game, which is kind of weird, but whatever. Anyway, in this scenario, Chloe comes across Victoria drugging a drink that's for Rachel, so she can take over the lead in the play.
I need to find whatever Victoria slipped into that drink.
Okay, so aside from the pranks going from hurtful to borderline homicidal, why do you need to do this? What I mean is find out what Victoria put in the drink. You could easily just dump that concoction in the trash like any normal sane person. But here's the real rut. You don't have to support Rachel. You can support Victoria to take the lead role from Rachel, but it's a moot point, because Rachel will still become the lead of the play. No matter what you do, Victoria will pass out and Rachel will be a part of the play.
The player's decisions will play a big role in determining exactly what their relationship is like and what kind of an impact Rachel's gonna have on.
So much for choice! Now, that's only if Rachel didn't get kicked out, because you swap the drinks, and Victoria will get knocked out. But what happens if Rachel can't be part of the play?
Tea?
For your instrument. We want you at your best tonight.
Okay, V. Time to shine.
Oh, Price, that was epic! You distracted her just long enough for me to slip those pills into her tea.
I did.
Oh, okay. I better start getting into costume before...
Sweet Carnation, we're ruined. The show is ruined.
That was quick.
Rachel drugs Victoria. What the actual fuck? So this is fucking terrible on so many levels. Let's first look at Chloe. Why is there no questioning of this? Even if we're supposed to believe that we're looking at Rachel through rose-tinted glasses, are you telling me that Chloe wouldn't have any problem with Rachel drugging someone? And to point something out, there has been this symbology of Rachel Amber being on fire and how fire is dangerous, stuff in Chloe's dreams, and I'll be talking more about that later, but this isn't something that Chloe finds issue with? You're telling me Chloe wouldn't have a problem with Rachel drugging someone? Wow, what a likable duo of characters! Then, when you think about this on a meta level, and this goes into spoilers, but I already put that tag up and talked about this, so you have no one to blame yourselves, in the original game, there were a few instances of people being drugged. Oh, and Chloe being shot in the head.
What the fuck?
Orgullosamente latino hasta la muerte y después. Worldwide Latino pride.
Kate Marsh was a girl who you can save from suicide in the original game. She was drugged and was made to perform in a viral video that was tasteless to say the least. It's what leads to her attempting suicide in the first game. Then there's Max. Boy oh boy, so let's come right out. Jefferson, the teacher I mentioned earlier, is the one who killed Rachel in the original game and drugged Max so he could, and I'm not joking, take pictures of her.
Oh, Max. I'm so glad you asked that question. Simply put, I'm obsessed with the idea of capturing that moment innocence evolves into corruption. That shift from black to white to gray and beyond. Most models are cynical. They lose that naivete. However, some Blackwell students carry their hope and optimism with them like an aura. And those lucky few become my models. My subjects.
It's just a really stupid motivation that's not worth going into here for this video, but my point is, in a series that has established that drugging people was done by villains, it kinda kneecaps the whole premise when one of the main characters that's supposed to be the hope for Chloe is actively drugging someone!
Oh my dude, you just got pranked. Bet you didn't see that one coming, huh?
And I know this isn't a very analytical way of explaining myself, but it's shitty writing. And I hope that you understand why.
Rachel Amber is not just a hero.
Maybe, but the game certainly doesn't frame it like that. Are you telling me that Chloe's moral compass is so eroded that she wouldn't have a problem with this? And you know what would have actually made this better? No joke. Actually have a choice here. Have the players decide if what Rachel did was messed up and have Chloe call her out on it. Or at the very least, go, wait, what? At least you'd have a little more agency to give your players, and while Chloe could still be horrible, if you choose to allow Rachel to pull this crap, at least we could see that Chloe would at least be conflicted on the matter.
I acted her just long enough for me to slip those pills into her teeth. I did.
What the fuck is this shit? God, this could be a video on its own, but I don't have time. We're already nearing the 32-minute mark. Although, I'd be remiss if I didn't bring up the play as a side note.
Most strange, bountiful fortune hath mine enemies brought to this shore. Here, cease more questions. Thou art inclined to sleep.
No matter how badly you do, you get rave reviews. Yay! What is choice? What is consequences? Who cares? The second section that I want to talk about involves Rachel's parents. The context is that after the play, Chloe and Rachel have talks about leaving Arcadia Bay, but before they do that, they have to go through a dinner with Rachel's parents. Dinner at 10:38 p.m. by the way. Who the hell eats dinner that late, especially when you are working upper class individuals? And what the hell is wrong with that milk? Ugh! In any case, tensions rise during this dinner.
There must be some room for personal responsibility. I'm sure you agree, Chloe.
My dad was super responsible. He always drove under the speed limit. Then one day, a truck came along and turned him into a super responsible pancake.
Excuse me, what? Did you just use your father's death as a retort about personal responsibility? What the
I just threw up in my mouth.
See? This is why it's so important to invite diverse voices to converse with one another. It's absolutely stimulating.
I'm sorry, are you saying that was a good rebuttal?
Obviously, this movie has its head up its own anus.
And we learned that the woman that Rachel's father kissed was actually her biological mother. And that while the Ambers had been keeping her away, paying her to stay away from Rachel because she was a druggie to the point where she OD'd, and why do I care about this?
Rachel, that woman you saw, that wasn't my mistress. That was your mother.
This is one of the weakest plot twists ever. And for some reason, the rest of the story focuses on Rachel's mother. Why? This story turned into Rachel Amber's backstory, which, not for naught, isn't why we're here. We're here to learn about the relationship between Chloe and Rachel. Hell, for most of episode 3, Rachel's not even in it. We also have to take in consideration Chloe and Rachel believe that Sarah could be a changed person.
She wants to see me?
Yes. But Rachel, it cannot be.
Why not? If that's what Rachel wants.
Drug addiction is a disease. It afflicts everyone, not just the addict. I will not allow you to be victimized by her disease again.
Even if that's true, Rachel could still meet her. And maybe the fact that she wants to see me means she's gotten better.
A few canonical minutes earlier.
Best part is, she and I use the same drug dealer.
Don't you love it when a chaptered game that takes months apart for each chapter to make have little gems like this that really make you go... In any case, Mr. Amber counters that since Sarah's been taking money for 15 years, instead of actually wanting to clean up, Sarah hasn't changed. And to give some credit to Chloe, she at least tries to understand Mr. Amber's side in this.
This must be hard for you too, Mr. Amber.
It could be far worse. My biggest fear is that Rachel will try to meet Sarah. I've dreaded it.
So that's why you never told her?
You have no idea what pain Sarah's caused. Her addiction has led her to do terrible things. I don't want Rachel to go through any of that.
I don't understand. Are you afraid that Sarah would do something to Rachel? Do you think Sarah is involved with any of the drug dealers around here?
Best part is, she and I use the same drug dealer.
Why do I even bother trying? Anyway, after this whole thing, we get a scene of Chloe and Rachel talking in Rachel's room. It tries to be very artistic and deep with star talk, but if you've seen Eric Salad Bar's video, you know it's dumb. And yes, I did get inspiration from him. You don't have to keep telling me, I already admitted it. Shut up.
I don't know. If they're not even real, then what's the point? It's all lies. Everything. My entire life. My dad. My mom. If I can even call her that anymore.
Say what now? Look, I get that your trust is broken, Rachel. Having such an earth-shattering revelation is something that a lot of people wouldn't get to understand or experience. But to basically hand-wave away all those years of your parents giving you their love, all the time they put into raising you, especially your mother who loved you unconditionally even though you're not blood-related, is just... stupid. I'm sorry I'm not being analytical here, but it's just stupid. And I get you're upset for being lied to. But you were just told that your mother chose money and drugs over you for 15 years. That's practically your entire life. And you're upset you can't meet this woman? Why would you want to? And you're willing to basically cast aside everything your family did to you just for someone you think may have changed, that you don't know, that you have barely have any interaction with while you're conscious.
Dad, stop. None of this is real. You're not real. Rachel's family isn't real.
I'm sorry, but what? Why is the love of Rachel's family not real? Because they told a lie they thought would be in Rachel's best interest? Something that, funnily enough, a lot of parents do in order to ensure the well-being of their kids. The game is trying to be really deep here, but unfortunately, with everything we're presented with, it only takes a few moments of actually thinking to say that this is stupid. And I'm aware that emotions are overruling, especially for a teenager, but we're told so much that Rachel is good at reading people and that she's smart. So why can't she, in the time between learning this information and when she meets up with Chloe in the junkyard the next day, Take some time and think about this logically. This just makes Rachel to be an over-emotional, spoiled brat who's willing to basically throw everything away for something in the moment. Funnily enough, this leads into the third example of why I don't like Rachel, and that's the symbolism that they show in the game. Throughout the game, we're given some very blatant symbolism about Rachel, hinting at her infidelity that was made canon in the first game. They do this with a whole bunch of fire metaphors, a lot of fire stuff, you get the idea. And yet, despite these dream premonitions that Chloe gets, she never once questions Rachel to the point where she's willing to break into Mr. Amber's office, steal some money from Mr. Amber, burn some evidence, trying to find Sarah's number, and basically almost gets busted by the police. Hell, Chloe questions her father's perfection in this, but not once questions Rachel at all? I'm sorry, but this doesn't make me like Rachel. And I find it very unbelievable that such a deep trust could be made between Chloe and Rachel, which is something that should have been built up with this game, and that there should have been more than just a handful of days to have this level of trust between the two.
Dad, stop. None of this is real. You're not real. Rachel's family isn't real.
If you have this level of skepticism, why is none of it levied at Rachel? Yes, I'm aware that in emotional times, trust can be something valuable, and you're not always going to be thinking the most logically. Just because people are creatures of emotion, that doesn't mean logic is thrown out the window, and vice versa though. Let's talk about another game. Take the Persona series, specifically 5. There's actually a scene that has a similar beat to it, where someone trusts a person they barely know with a very serious subject. And Takamaki is a student who's being pressured by a teacher into sleeping with him, just to make sure that her best friend doesn't lose her spot in the sports team. She's been sidestepping his advances, and she's been at the breaking point, when the main character Joker just coincidentally overhears their conversation and begins to follow her. After a small little chase sequence, the two seclude themselves in a more private place and Anne spills her heart out. But here's the thing, she doesn't ask him for help, she doesn't rely on him, and she doesn't have him do anything illegal for her, because it's not his problem, and doesn't want to get others involved. And throughout the rest of the game, you grow closer with the girl, becoming friends and learning more about her. This is how you establish this type of relationship with trust, at foundation of a tragic event that's even ongoing, not demanding those who are willing to listen and not manipulating them either. Hell, you want me to like Chloe? Have Chloe go against Rachel's wishes. Have her be the one to seek out the phone number on her own volition. Have her think, maybe if I do this for Rachel, she can get some closure. That would make Chloe seem a little bit more selfless, and it wouldn't paint Rachel as a terrible person. But perhaps the manipulation is the point of Before the Storm, that Chloe and Rachel's relationship is toxic, that leads to the tragic end of both of them. But if it is, whoo boy does it suck! Not only does it raise more questions than it answers, and trust me, I could bring up a ton of more examples of this. Like for example, how did Frank go from an alright guy who was willing to defend Chloe and Rachel, and turned into the asshole for the main game? A prequel shouldn't be bringing more questions to the table, nor should it attempt to raise flags for the original story it's basing it on. Hey, post-edit comment here, and I actually forgot that I want to talk about Rachel's characterization and how it contradicts itself. So, let's take these scenes for example.
You lying, cheating piece of shit, motherfucker.
Excuse me?
Kissing that woman.
James.
Rachel? Honey, whatever you saw or think you saw, I know it's hard, but I need you to trust me.
No offense, Mr. Amber, but I think we trust our eyes more than you. Why can't you just tell me the fucking truth? Stop lying!
I want to make it clear that I agree with Rachel here in concept. That is kind of a problem. When you go back to play the original though, you get this scene.
That makes me ill that Rachel posed like this for Frank. I wrote him love letters. I can't believe she was banging Frank. Rachel straight up lied to my face. Why didn't she say anything?
So, let me get this straight. A character who knows the heartbreak and pain that infidelity and lying to your loved ones can create, then goes on to lie to the person who's been through this entire event and acting as support, and has stated that she's afraid of becoming her father, becomes the thing she hates.
That's gonna be a fucking yikes for me.
Since it's acting as a replacement foundation. Otherwise, it acts as a replacement foundation that's built on sand or rotted wood. Now, like last time, I think it's only fair that I talk about what makes a good prequel. And even though I gushed about it in its own video, let's talk about Yakuza 0.
Yeah, you know what? Oh, too bad.
I think that just because something is a prequel, that doesn't mean it can't be good, whether it stands on its own or works as an addition to the original story built. I've already listed reasons why I think Before the Storm is a terrible prequel, but for this part of the video, we'll be going over what I think makes an actually good prequel. And since not a lot of you watched my Yakuza 0 video, you're gonna sit down and enjoy this, boys and girls! Yakuza 0 is the 6th game in the Yakuza franchise, and it's a prequel to the story, but unlike, say, Before the Storm, it doesn't have any actual meaningful choices that would affect the narrative. Sure, there are choices in the game, but I say that with heavy quotes. This, to me, is how you do choice well in a prequel. You offer inconsequential choices that shouldn't have an impact in the story itself, but can impact the smaller stories in the game. It doesn't help that it can be really funny at the same time. And can really do a number for humanizing the two main characters, Kiryu and Majima, who, if you're not aware, are technically criminals. I mean, they are a part of the Yakuza, or were a part of it, and already we've gotten ourselves something that actively makes Yakuza 0 a better prequel. The choices don't matter, they don't affect the main plot, but can still offer something to the players, whether it be for entertainment value or interesting subplots. Subplots don't really waste your time since most of them are optional to do. While I'll dive into this a bit deeper in later sections of this video, the sub-stories often allow the player to get a deeper look into the main characters' heads and personalities, putting them into more outrageous situations that allow the player to view the characters in different lights, fleshing out who they are.
Okay.
It's one of the things I'll get more into, but needless to say, by having more unique avenues for our characters to explore, it works wonders for people to actually adapt and get used to these characters. Yeah, that works wonders for people to actually get to know these characters. But now, let's talk about the main story and how it works as a prequel. Now I want to point something out. Yakuza 0 still has the weakness of being a prequel to a very long-running series. After all, if Kiryu, the main protagonist, was to die in this game, then that'd be a pretty big plot hole.
Snake, what have you done? You changed the future. You've created a time paradox.
And supposedly it would be a pretty steep hill for the game to rise up to. But here's a fun trick, and something that Before the Storm should have done. It doesn't attempt to flesh out a character who was basically a MacGuffin with something that won't actually have a connection to the main story. What do I mean? Well, this is where we talk about Yakuza's main story. In the first game, and Kiwami, which is a remake, the main antagonist was a character named Nishiki, someone who was the lead's best friend and sworn brother to Kiryu, even to the point where Kiryu is willing to go as far as to jail for Nishiki.
Dojima Kumicho.
Kiryu. Kumicho が趣味を無理やりだから撃っちまったんだ。カッとなっちまって何発も
弓おい、しっかりしろ。
やっちまった。東商会の大幹部を。
錦、
ユミを連れて逃げろ。何言ってんだ。おめえこそユミ連れて逃げろ。お前がいなくなったら妹はどうなるんだ。次の手術が最後なんだろう。そんな時。
Yeah, normally I'd use the English dub of the original Yakuza game, but...
The fuck you think you're doing? And just what the fuck family are you from, huh?
Excuse me.
Excuse you? No.
Fun fact, Majima was actually voiced by Mark Hamill.
This is the part where you're supposed to laugh! Laugh, you stupid motherfucker!
Yakuza 0, we actually got to see how Kiryu and Nishiki's sworn brotherhood developed, basically fleshing out how these two characters were so close to each other, even to the point where Nishiki was willing to kill not only Kiryu, but himself in order to spare them from the Yakuza's wrath. Basically, Kiryu did a big stupid thing in the beginning and got himself accused of a crime, and now there's a whole thing here. It's a long story that would make this video 10 times longer if I went through detailed with it.
組の命令ってことなのか、錦。そんなんじゃねえ。桐生、お前、組の制裁で殺される人間がどういう目に遭うか知ってるか。堂島組ってとこは見せしめの死体を作る天才だぜ。人間がどの程度痛めつければ死ぬのかよく知ってる。それをとことん死なねえように殺すんだ。生かしたまんま。できるだけ長く苦しむようにだ。生きたまま解剖されるような拷問されて散々痛めつけられた挙句、そして後になって見つかった死体はもう人間と呼べるようなもんじゃねえ。俺はな、桐生、兄弟としておめえにそんな死に方させられねえよ!
Anyway, while there was some light shown on these two characters' relationships, with Yakuza 0, the developers came up with the brilliant idea of showing how the two characters were close with each other in a more real time. This is how you flesh out a backstory of characters, basically showing the relationship with each other, as well as the events that got them to where they were in the main story. Remember, these events in the characters' past have already happened. We're just watching them unfold. And the sworn brotherhood between Kiryu and Nishiki is a great example of how to do this, that we see that they're willing to sacrifice what they can do for each other because of their bond.
お前、自分が何してんのか分かってんのか。言ったはずだ。今俺に手を貸せば、お前は。うるせえ！俺は、おめえがいねえ登場会でのし上がっても意味がねえんだ。おめえがいくら言ったとこで俺との縁は切らしゃしねえ。錦、覚悟しろよ。俺は一生おめえにつきまとってやる。そこまで腹くくられたんじゃもう何も言えねえな。暴れてやろうぜ、兄弟。行くぞ。
Doesn't hurt they can be total badasses at the same time. We get to actually see the struggles of these two as they try to maintain their relationship, despite the strain of the Yakuza pressures and how Kiryu is willing to paint a target on his back to keep his sworn brother safe from the family he defected from, with Nishiki rejecting that and willing to put his own life on the line for Kiryu. Yakuza 0 does a great job of doing this in order to illustrate the relationship between these two characters in a more tragic light when you get to the first game's story. These two characters who are more than willing to go so far to protect each other that they eventually become enemies.
一番大切にしていたお前たちを失った。もう戻ろうと思っても10年前に戻ることはできねえ。もうその運命から逃げることはできねえ。だから決着をつけよう。なあ、決着をつけよう。俺たちの戦いに。
Okay, it's not settled with a dance-off, but a fight between these two. But you get the idea. The prequel doesn't attempt to change the history of Yakuza. Well, there are a few things, but it depends on if you're playing the remakes or the original games. You get my point. It doesn't want to change the history, but rather tell the history. And this is part of the reason why I disagree that a prequel story is inherently bad. Prequels exist to explain the past of stories in order to flesh out any mystery for the fans. Sure, you can argue that the ending is spoiled. We know canonically both Kiryu and Nishiki won't actually die in Yakuza 0, but I'd counter with the fact that we're not here for the ending. We're here for the journey. It just so happens that the journey itself is a content-full adventure that has a ton of side stories, a pretty tight combat system, and some kick-ass music. So I'd be lying if I didn't say that Yakuza 0 didn't have a leg up on Before the Storm in several ways. Hell, I'd argue that it's objectively a better game than Life is Strange, in terms of content, story, presentation, and music. So let's take a moment and talk about a specific character, much like how I did with Rachel Amber.
This is the part where you're supposed to laugh! Laugh, you stupid motherfucker!
Goro Majima. He's a well-known reoccurring character in Yakuza, a character who's got his interesting role where he'll be an ally in some games and scenes, or he'll be a boss. But regardless, Majima has a very intriguing and fun character for the series.
でも親父、これでこの配線を解読できるんですか？
アホか！俺がこないなごちゃごちゃしたもん分かるはずないやろが。せやけどやらにゃしゃあないから。 こうやって勘を働かしとるんやないか。勘?
But regardless, Majima has been a very intriguing and fun character for the series. And in Yakuza 0, he's one of the two playable characters. Back in 1988, so when he was a young man. So you got a character who's mostly been seen like this. Acting like this.
こいつはおごりや。 たんともいい。どうや、神様からのお恵みは。
ありがとうございます。私はこの酒を一度浴びるように飲んでみたかったのですが。 おかげさまで夢が叶いました。
Now here's where we talk about development in prequels. So heads up, if you played Yakuza 4, we actually play a character named Taiga Sajima, a character that was a sworn brother with Majima, and when you play as Sajima, your goal is to get the truth from Majima. As it turns out, the sworn brothers were supposed to kill another group of Yakuza, but Majima didn't show up, and as a result, Taiga was thrown into jail for his attack, spending 25 years in the clink. As it turns out, Majima was actually being held up by another member of the Yakuza he's a part of.
迷惑をかけることになってしまいます。兄弟はもう向かってねえや。じゃあ俺はどうしたらいいんじゃ。真島さん。 あんたは俺に兄弟裏切れっちゅうんか。このまま見殺しにせっちゅうんか。落ち着いて、落ち着いて。俺は行く。たとえどんな裏があっても構へん。俺にとって冴島はたった一人の兄弟なんじゃ。真島さん。でもそれじゃああなたの身も。うるさい、関係ないわ。こっちはそないなもん。とっくに捨てる払ってきたんじゃ。 そうですか。それじゃ仕方ありませんね。おい。柴田。
And in Yakuza 0, we see Majima's time being fleshed out, at least 3 years after the attack. And while we got this scene in Yakuza 4, we still get more added to Majima's backstory and what happens after this event in time. We learn of the hardships that Majima, he's forced to run one of the biggest cabaret clubs, with the looming debt and threat of the family over his head. This game also shows a kinder and more compelling side of Majima too. For a bit of context, Majima is tasked with finding and killing Makoto Makimura, whom at first he thinks is a burly man.
Oh, これはお邪魔やったかな。
この方、店長をご指名でいらっしゃったんですよ。お仕事が大変みたいで、体中カチカチで、私が無理言って施術させてもらったんです。ですよね。
ああ、そうや。
But it actually turns out his target was a blind young woman.
なんや。
怖かった。怖かったよ。
大丈夫や。
With his own life on the line, should he fail to do this quest, he'll be killed. Majima throws his own goals in life to the side to protect someone who has nothing to do with his situation. Even when there's a chance to get out by killing another girl who looks like Makoto, we get this scene.
ほんまに身代わり立てるしか手がないんや。この先誠を守りきるには誠の死体が必要や。このままやったらいつか誠んとこにお前以外の殺し屋が来る。それより前にお前もやられるで。なんでそれがわからんねや。それやったらそれで俺が向かってくるもん一人残らずぶっ殺したらば。なんやと。そんなできるわけ。確かに一度黒に染まったもんはどこまで行っても黒や。そっから抜けることはできんけどな。それでも噛みつく相手選ぶくらいはできる。それが俺の流儀や。おい、やめろや。
Now, granted, to some other events in the game, the scapegoat does bite the dust, but not by Majima's hands. But this is how you expand upon a character in a prequel. In order to flesh out a character without actively contradicting the main story, you need to show different sides of them, because funnily enough, over time, people can change, they evolve, they grow up, they mature. Well, most of the time. Like a sword tempered in fire, the more you refine it, the stronger it becomes, and people are just the same. Just don't throw them into the fire and expect something to come out. We need to be able to see the characters react to the scenes in question, and there needs to be a connection to the main story events as well. This is why, in my humble opinion, Before the Storm fails in that regard. There was such a heavy focus on Rachel's mother that there wasn't really anything to latch onto in my opinion. Especially since these characters don't have any foothold in the story. Rachel's mother, Rachel's family. We don't get to see them in the main game, so what's the point? Meanwhile, in Yakuza, not only is Majima's situation directly related to events that are in the previous games, but they also flesh out his character and show the connection between the plot threads. To put it simply, there's a connection between the prequel's plot and the main story, and it fleshes out the characters at the same time. Doesn't hurt that Majima is basically 100 times more likable than Rachel. Hell, let's talk about that. When it comes to characterization, especially for characters who are supposed to be more negative, for example, Rachel's infidelity and Majima's... There still needs to be something positive for people to latch onto. This is what Rachel and Chloe's relationship should have been, and yet I'm left with nothing but contempt for the character and find the relationship to be rushed and rather poor. As for Majima, well, throughout the prequel and a mainstay throughout the series, you get these sub-stories that, while I've mentioned are optional, do flesh out the characters. Fun little fact, the series is actually titled Ryuga Gotoko, and God, I hope I pronounced that right, also known as Like a Dragon, and was never meant to be seen as crime simulators or anything like that. I mean, there's always been this stigma that Yakuza was sent to be a Japanese GTA, but that's not true. You always play more or less good guys in these games. So while you may be this tough guy who kicks ass, you still go out of your way to, and not kidding, save a daughter from a cult, get a little girl from a UFO catcher. Oh, you cheating piece of crap! Help raise taxes in Japan. Wait, what? We're supposed to help people, aren't we? Helping a statue, street performer, get to the can. And many, many more. There's a reason for why to really like Majima as a character and as a person. Meanwhile, I don't see that charm for Rachel, especially when she's painted to be this chameleon of sorts and very, very likable. I don't see it. And I'm sure that people are going to say that it doesn't matter if I like Rachel, but only if Chloe likes her. Sure, that's a fine point, but when a story asks me to understand a relationship between two characters, and it being the foothold for the main game, I do expect there to see some actual reason as to why Chloe would like Rachel other than just one act of kindness at a concert. Anyway, here's Majima saying,
Hey, wait a minute.
I think it's no surprise that I think highly of the Yakuza series and think poorly of Life is Strange. And some people think it's really weird that I dare compare games that don't share a genre. But here's the thing, we're not comparing genres. We're comparing writing of characters, prequels, relationships, all that jazz. Someone told me in my last video that I should have compared Chloe to that of a Danganronpa character, most notably Sayaka, since both characters use the main protagonist for their own means. But to me, that ignores the actual point I'm trying to make. In my original video, we were talking about how to not make a terrible character, and in this video, we're talking about prequels and how to do them well and not so well. Not necessarily in that order. So I'm making it clear. I'm only looking at these games and characters based on the strength of their character, not the strength of their muscles. I think it's safe to assume that the big burly Yakuza who can fight friggin' tigers could easily beat up 2 teenage girls. Time powers be damned. When talking about writing, while genre can be a factor, it doesn't mean you can't compare 2 stories that have different genres. Nor does it mean that it's impossible to take influence from things you love and apply them to your own work or other people's work and see how it actually reflects upon it. And trust me, I'm well aware of how much people like Chloe and Rachel. Don't let this one nerd on the internet take that away from you. I'm just a guy who likes to voice his opinion about topics he likes. And just because I hold a different opinion than you, that doesn't mean your opinion is invalid, nor does it mean I hold my opinion as gospel. I just like talking about nerd shit.
Touch my brother. You hear me, Brett? F you, Diaz. He got his fake blood shit all over my shirt. Look! I told you, it was an accident!
Well, this is probably going to be a contentious video. I want to make this perfectly clear before we start the video. I don't like politics. Now, that doesn't mean I don't think politics are important. I don't think that people shouldn't be talking about them, or that games can't talk about them. The thing about art is that it can carry a message in it, whether it be moral, social, or political. And frankly, that's great. It gives more meaning. Art is a perfectly fine vessel to convey an artist's feelings and can be more powerful as a piece when it has something to it. So, what's the game we're talking about? Gonna be honest, once True Colors comes out and I'm done with that video, I'll be glad that I'm moving away from this series. The son of a bitch! Life is Strange 2 is a weird beast, mainly because according to 72% out of 12,000 people, they didn't even know the game existed. I'm not saying that my audience is representative of this. It's just a funny little poll I took just to get some opinions on the game, and as far as I can tell, there's actually a divide between the fan base about it. That could just be from what I saw, and as usual, you got those people who make me not want to even touch the game because I know that they won't actually listen to what I have to say because they act like they're in a cult. Seriously, fandoms can be scary! And pretty egotistical. Honestly, part of me doesn't even want to deal with this game, simply because I know it's gonna be a fucking headache. But I find it amazing the game didn't really have that great a reception, some in part due to the change in the main characters, and some poor marketing. I know there was a movement talking about how art can be objective. I'm sure if I talked about the issues that I have with said mindset, I'll probably show up on an EFAP podcast that'll probably be 2 hours in before they actually get to this segment of the video. But if you don't care, there's a reason why there's things called chapters. You can skip to the next part. Simply put, games, movies, anime, whatever, they are art. And art is subjective. Being an art form, which is perceived differently by different people, is precisely why I don't believe media can be appraised objectively. The things that people rate games and movies on, acting, directing, writing, cinematography, editing, lighting, score, the kitchen sink, and so on, are rated subjectively. What one person thinks is good, another thinks is bad. Are there objective things you can criticize media for? Oh, hella yes! Daniel, I know you just developed superpowers, but holy shit, Goku, did you teach Daniel instant transmission? Stuff like glitches, technical issues, and that sort of jazz is stuff that can be seen as objective flaws. However, stuff like acting, art direction, graphics, that's subjective! Just because there's an appearance of consensus, that doesn't make something into a fact. Persona 5 was seen as a masterpiece when it came out, but nowadays you got a ton of people who hate on the game and criticize it. Granted, some of that criticism is complete BS that people seem to guzzle down like it was a fucking Kool-Aid at the nearby church with people's walkie-talkies stuck in their hands. What the frig is this? Critically acclaimed game, everyone! 10 out of 10! My ass! Jokes and pointing out our awkward award system for games being completely broken, I think it's time we talk about Life is Strange 2, before I have to deal with the headache that the comments section will be. I'm Uncle Common, and let's begin. So, Life is Strange followed the story of Max and Chloe, with Max having time travel powers. Meanwhile, before the storms approach... God, how I wish I could be playing Devil May Cry 5 right now. Before the storm's approach was to follow Chloe as she starts her relationship with Rachel. And if you guys know anything about this channel, I don't think I really need to tell you that those games really aren't worth the amount of awards that were given to them. Then again, considering that the video game awards are nothing more than glorified wankfests by game journalists who barely know how to play a game, I don't really think these awards mean anything anymore. It's the perfect game! No way to deny that! Now, Life is Strange 2, Electric Boogaloo, follows the brothers Sean and Daniel Diaz, two half-Mexican boys with Sean being a teenager and Daniel being a little kid. After the two lose their father in an accident involving a police officer, and Daniel developing telekinesis, which, well... yeah, the boy in blue ain't getting up. Anyway, the two brothers are on the lam on the way to Mexico, and before we get into the specifics of the actual story, I want to touch on the basic premise, and funnily enough, I find to be weaker than the original Life is Strange's. The first major difference is that when you played Max, you had the ability to rewind time. It was a power that worked well with the adventure genre that allowed you to redo some decisions you made and even came into play with some elements of the plot and puzzles. Meanwhile, telekinesis, not so much. It's not even the power of the main character who has it. Like, I got issues with the first game's story, but at least the time travel mechanic was somewhat interesting. So, what does 2 do? Obviously, I'm being a bit hyperbolic for the sake of comedy, but not by much. That's the thing with these adventure games. They have a limitation on forms of gameplay, or at least that's what they have evolved into nowadays. You see, boys and girls, I come from the time of Monkey Island, where these kinds of games would have a different kind of engagement to them, where the majesty of point-and-click adventure games would have you talk to various people, grab various things, and solve puzzles based upon your inventory and be able to communicate with people. While it was on the rails, it at least provides an entertaining show that distracts the player from the path they're supposed to take. This is kind of a complicated aspect for me to explain, but I guess the best way to put it would be, I can see the puppet strings that the developers have for this game, and when you have the story on rails with the choices being up front and yet still being led along where the developers want you to go, it can be very distracting. At least with Max, the time traveling powers at least made it so she could be a bit more memorable, and you could take back your choices. But there was a drastic shift. The shift from take your choices at any moment to your choices gradually evolve and change Daniel's personality is neat, but mechanically unfulfilling. It doesn't really feel like they utilize that shift all that well, at least to me. Especially when there's nothing else to the game. Most of what Sean can do is extremely dull. Pick up stuff, look at stuff, draw some stuff, talk to someone's stuff. There are no real puzzles to solve, no challenge, no real difficulty to figure out what to do next. Gee, thanks Don't Nod. You really made me understand why I love video games, just as exciting as folding my laundry. Another aspect that doesn't help is the basic story structure change. In the original game, it was a quasi-murder mystery high school drama with a supernatural bullshit twist. And frankly, I prefer there to be some mystery in a game. Here, the murder isn't a mystery, and we're just watching the Diaz brothers' lives get progressively worse. So it doesn't feel like the plot is progressing except for when Sean says, "We must shift down in Mexico!" Seriously though, I think Sean is a furry. Just look at his notebook.
He's totally a furry. What is this? What is all this shit? He's a furry. Is that Cool Cat? Cool Cat on weed? Total furry. What is this? What is this? Oh my god!
Back on topic, obviously there's going to be a preference for these types of stories. A mystery is more than likely to get a few more people invested as it entices the audience with a question that they can draw people into. Life is Strange 2 does have sort of a mystery, but in comparison to Rachel's disappearance in this one, it doesn't really act as a driving force for the two brothers and their escapades. Heck, if anything, I'd say the story of Life is Strange 2 lacks a lot of impact that the first one did. And for me to say that after criticizing both the first and sequel, that's gotta mean something. We also need to take into account location. In the first game, Arcadia Bay was a singular location where the story took place, and that had its strengths. It allows you to have a more coherent cast of characters, familiar locations, allows you to get away with asset reuse and location modifications, etc, etc. However, with 2's story, the whole game focuses on traveling through a number of different locations and seasons. Not only does this make the story a bit more jumbled, since you have to have a different set piece each chapter that can't really be used in other chapters, but the way the story is set up, you won't really have much of a chance to form a connection to the side characters. Or at least one that's not really meaningful. I'm not saying that a story like this can't work, but it requires a lot of work and effort to make the side characters memorable, as well as having a protagonist who can work with the limited time they have with the other characters. Now we've gotten that out of the way, let's actually dive into the story and the issues I have with it. I think before we continue, we do need to consider the inciting incident. Now, while I do have my own thoughts on this, I thought it'd be best to get the perspective of someone who has experience with this. So I'd like you to meet my editor, Mr. Cake Dragon Man.
Hello, good morning, guten tag, good evening. And all the other garbage, it's me, Mr. Cake Dragon Man. Now, for those of you who don't know, I have been editing the Life is Strange videos since day one, and if I look at Chloe Price's stupid, dumb face again, I will actually end my existence. Now, I was tasked to watch the initial video right here, and the reason why is because my family has a bad history with cops. We do know shitty cops when we see one. We live in fucking Florida, so you already know that shit's fucked. Now, I'm gonna watch the initial scene and I'm gonna give my commentary on certain things that are just wrong. So as Philip DeFranco says, let's just jump right into it. Now the first initial thing that I have to say here is I hate Sean and his dumb face and his dumb furry comics and all this other garbage that he does. He always makes things worse. I don't think I've seen a single scene where Sean has actively made things better. Yes, I understand that he is 16 years old, but even a 16-year-old isn't a complete dumbass.
This man literally has the IQ equivalent of Luz Nocera from the Owl House, and trust me, that's not a good thing.
While watching the scene prior, we do get to see that the kid, the racist kid with the fake blood on his shirt, is definitely a piece of shit. But the problem that I have is that his insults are just lame.
Oh yeah, go hide in your dad's garage. He's a fucking retard. Take the little baby back to his crib. Yeah, go back to daddy. Pussies.
He literally does the fucking ooh voice and shit.
I swear, where?
Also, if the entire family are a bunch of racist assholes, why do you live next to them?
Granted, we don't know the situation between the family of the racist kid or the I don't know the fuck what Sean and Daniel's last names are. Still, there should be some sort of like middle ground you should meet. I mean, there's no way that this is Daniel's first offense of being a complete dumbass.
The IQ stem does not fall far from the tree of this family, because I'm gonna explain why everyone in this family are a bunch of dumbass idiots. With Sean, you can choose to do the right thing for him to be mad at Daniel for spraying that stuff on the other guy, and then you could walk away. I think the problem that I have, though, is the fact that, like, the kid just keeps fucking going, and him talking about his mom, like, essentially sets him off, and then after that we get this neat punch in the fucking face.
Whoa! Sean, you hit him!
I like the fact that the racist kid literally got no shots in to prove how pathetic they are. Listen, I understand that you want to write racists in a bad light, but at least get a few shots from the other kid, you know? I don't expect wimpy artist bitch boy Sean to take on a guy who, I'm gonna just guess and say that he's like some sort of like athlete of some kind. Let's just say he isn't, and he's a normal kid. Then the cop comes in when Daniel pushes the kid to the ground, and apparently he just fucking expires, which, no, listen, I have seen Matt Hardy fall down, and I understand that kid's a babby, he's a little boy, but I'm also gonna have to say bullshit because he landed on the grass. If there was like a rock that his head laid onto, then it would have been possible for him to fucking die. If anything, his back hit a fucking rock, but it was a very thin rock, a very shitty looking fake ass rock. So that might have hurt his back. The biggest fuck you to me is the cop. He's just absolutely terrified of these children for no reason and is inexperienced. There should be 2 cops, by the way. From what I have seen, you are not allowed to go solo during rides. You're supposed to have backup with you at all times. And for some reason, this fucking goober over here is by himself. Obviously a rookie, obviously scared of the situation at hand, so we don't know why he's fucking there. And then the big scene with the dad. No, I'm sorry. Sean fucking instigates him more.
Step away. Now. Calm down, officer.
Dense motherfucker. If you are dealing with a bad cop or a racist cop or any of those cops, you have to listen to what they say or you will be in trouble. Unless they are actually provoking your rights and being fucking bastards to you, then you have to listen to them or you are going to get fucking hurt. But the problem with this cop is he has a gun. He doesn't take out a taser. He takes out a fucking gun on 2 children. What the fuck? The fucking dad runs in and tries to stop the cop.
We didn't do
Sean,
anything.
be quiet.
I swear.
Officer,
Sean,
listen.
I'm sorry, Dad.
Daddy!
Be quiet.
I wanna go home!
They're good kids, officer.
And then, you know, he gets shot and fucking dies and then Daniel does his stupid powers and shit. And yeah, this is the portion where I give my final thoughts. Not all police are bad. In reality, they go in pairs. So, this makes no sense in reality whatsoever. Thank you, Manga Kamen, for the money. I will now spend it on a REM body pillow.
Now get the fuck out of my trash hole!
I appreciate my editor's take on this. Now, granted, there are some issues that I do have with this opening. I'm not blind to the anti-cop rhetoric that our country has, and I'm certainly not going to deny that there are terrible cops in the United States. But I'm really hard-pressed to see how this particular cop is racist. Everything given in the game that we can view about this cop says that this guy was only 6 months on the job and apparently did charity work outside of it. Nothing the cop said was racist. It's not like he went,
"Drop the burrito!" The
only aspect that can be gleaned from the game's information is that the cop was interacting with the main characters and their father. Now, if there's information I'm missing, please let me know. Anyway, once we get the copy of Life is Strange's opening, Sean takes and knocked out Daniel and runs off. This is probably the part of the video where you guys think I'm gonna chide the kid for running away from the scene. Well, fuck you don't know me. Sorry to be disappointing, but considering that this is a 16-year-old kid who just witnessed his father dying right before his eyes, I'm more than willing to be a bit more understanding, at least at this point in the story. No. My issue is the believability. Here's the thing when you set a story with a supernatural element in our real world. Unless there's been a presence that's been known publicly, the assumption of the real world and the setting that the story takes place in will be ours as well. That includes events, laws, and the culture at the time. More specifically, laws. We're shown that there's documented footage of the cop being killed by being flung over by a powerful force. Enough force to flip him onto the car and even push the car over. So how the bloody hell would a teenager be able to pull that off?
But this isn't anime or a video game.
How in the world would the cops be able to determine if Sean was even responsible for this sort of thing? What? Do the cops have their own psyche that tells them these things?
I see nothing here.
You see, that's the problem here. When you put a story based in our world, you're going to have to play by the logic of our world. In addition, I have no idea how the cops were unable to find the two brothers in the first chapter, especially since Sean still had his cell phone on him. Because guess what? Regardless if the phone is turned off or not, your phone can connect to the internet. If your phone can connect to the internet, the police can track ya, and they can do it legally too. So for all intents and purposes, this should have happened.
Fuck it, go down to Mexico, you know?
Denied! Casey Smith!
Your Honor, do I still get paid?
Look, I admit I'm getting a bit too pedantic about this, but when a game wants to give a message about this sort of thing, you need to expect questions, and if at the drop of a hat your questions begin to put holes in the narrative, especially the basic setup, it makes it hard for me to want to actually believe this story. Then again, the characters make that a chore as well.
Dead animal. Uh-oh, we're gonna start another Kiro the Wolf situation. Screw this! Ah, don't do that!
I think it's important to realize that with this story, it has a completely different structure from the original game. I mentioned it before, but since Life is Strange 2 has the Diaz brothers crossing the country, as such it means that the characters you meet will have much more limited screen time and you'll have to limit development for them as well. The characters were the strongest part of the first two games. At least, if you like them. But here, while the Diaz brothers remain the focus of the story, there's a single additional character in the entire story that remains a focus for more than a full episode. And while that character is important to the story, it seems that Life is Strange 2 generates characters only to toss them away at the first chance they get when we get to the next chapter. Sure, you might get a check-in on the character, but they soon disappear. Like, take for example...
I know what you're thinking.
No, it can't be. Glasses, reddish hair, hipster. He likes to make literature references in his writing. No, it's no! You know, I always wondered what would happen to Alex if he was able to survive Yick. It's only appropriate that he be writing a progressive blog talking about nudists in a gas station in front of a little kid. Sicko.
What the hell is this creep looking at?
Anyway, Brody here only shows up for the first episode, helps out the characters in a big way, and save for a couple of small blurbs that you read about on his blog, that's the only thing you get for this character. So if the audience liked this character...
This place is the fire!
That's the only time you get to actually interact with him. There's barely any character development for the side characters. NPCs like Life is Strange 1 had Victoria and David change over the course of the story. That was what part of the magic of the first game from what I got. You really got to see the multifaceted characters at almost every turn. They started off as one-note characters, but as you progress through the story, they slowly evolved. At least some of them did. In this game, we're stuck with the faceless NPCs that come and go, but matter little. Most are so paper-thin, they don't bother to just border on being stereotypes. They are stereotypes, and they're not around long enough to matter anyway. I'm not saying there aren't good moments with these characters.
Don't handle this alone. Maybe you're right. His grandparents, my wife's parents, they offered me their help, and they want Chris to go live with them.
But they are in the minority. Let's talk about Sean and Daniel's mother. Karen. Yes, that's her name. She practically is one of the few characters that is built up and actually has some follow-through. Like through the first chapter, we get a hint that Karen disappeared since the Diaz family only had their father looking out for them. And in the second chapter, we visit the grandparents' home and learn more about her. Then in episode 4... Right. Let's talk about Karen's reason for leaving.
I didn't have a choice, Sean. We only have one life, and I didn't want mine to be spent in regrets. For years, I fooled myself, thinking I'd find satisfaction into what society expected me to be, and that was my mistake. I hope someday you can understand that.
Why does this sound so
While the rest of us were pursuing college, careers, families, Sarah wasn't looking for any of that. She was looking for escape. However much she loved you then, it wasn't enough. For Sarah, the need to escape was always there.
Way to go, recycling character beats. Woo! And I'm sure this is a common event amongst plenty of parents who are saddled with kids. It's something that I can understand. But the game does a terrible job of making me want to empathize with the character and how it frames her. Karen's choice of living free without regrets meant that she'd leave her husband to take care of an 8-year-old kid and a newborn. Alone. And here's the thing, I completely understand the feeling of being trapped by society's standards, as well as not wanting to waste the only life I have. Ironic considering I'm wasting a lot of my life making these videos, but you get the point. But here's the rub. It shouldn't be at the expense of others, especially when those others are lives that you yourself created. When you have kids, your life isn't yours anymore. You can still pursue dreams and passions to a point, but your kids should come first. You made a human being that needs care, love, and attention. The way the story frames Karen, I kind of expected there to be a better reason than I was looking for an escape. Something that the series already tackled in Before the Storm. I wouldn't have much of an issue with this, but apparently she cut all forms of communication off with her family save for a P.O. box. With how it was set up, I was expecting there to be a bit more oomph to the reason why she left. The game did make a big deal of preventing Sean and Daniel from going to her room. Really, the only characters that Life is Strange 2 that feel like they get a proper amount of development is the group that the brothers meet in episode 3. This is a collective that the main characters join and spend time with, and that's where Life is Strange 2 is probably the strongest when it takes time to explore and make the characters feel like other characters that are important to the story. At least in theory, it's filled with a lot of fluff. But sure enough, by the end of the episode, all the development that these characters are having is quickly shoved aside to move to the story elements, and the players are left feeling lost again, at least in my experience. It's not being lost because of a lack of direction, but an inability to hold on to anything in value. It comes off if it's too eager to explore its themes, and it ignores what the player wants to have something more than a fleeting experience. In my experience, players will constantly be trying to make lasting relationships with characters that they like, even choosing options in the hope that those characters might reappear. Yet, in this game, it constantly acts like it doesn't want to invest any additional time into the characters. It has a much more important story it wants to rush into, as it wants to really tell a story about racism. Hell, this even actually hurts the main characters, Sean and Daniel, because, well, I don't really care for them. They're really the only consistent characters, but the relationships and interactions with each other are conflicting, to say the least. Not helped that Sean is probably one of the blandest main characters in gaming I've ever played in a while. And it has to do with the formatting that a lot of the episodes follow. Daniel does something stupid, Sean knows it's stupid and warns Daniel, but Daniel doesn't listen. Things backfire on Daniel, Sean tries to save him again, Daniel starts to overreact and then uses his powers to make some heavy life-death decision. Yay. And then the two brothers go back on the road. It kind of gets redundant when you realize that's practically how every episode goes, and how sometimes the changes come out of left field. Like in episode 4 when Daniel joins a religious cult after thinking his brother was practically dead, and instead of listening to his brother, listens to the crazy cult lady, even though Danielle was never really religious. Let's go away from this and focus on Sean's choices. Now, I'll give a little credit. Your choices in the story are used to actually change up the story at the end. While there is a binary choice at the end of the game, there are multiple endings that, depending on how you choose to do good things or bad things, Daniel will react to your choice and change the result. Again, I have to tip my hat to this, as it fixes one of the biggest issues that it was in the first game for me. The only other problem, though, is that the rest of your choices don't make a lick of sense or don't matter. There's a path that the writers want you to take, and no matter what you say, no matter what you do, you will follow that path. Granted, this is a criticism I have with a lot of adventure games, and only a handful of examples of visual novels work with it. I may have issues with the game, but a more recent example of this is Detroit Become Human, where it has a lot of different paths, and even your choices can affect other aspects of your characters. Meanwhile, in Life is Strange 2, there are some changes between the behaviors of Daniel and Sean, but depending on the chapter, there will be dominant character traits that fly in the face of your choices. Such as in Chapter 3, Sean, no matter what you do, will be caught stealing from a drug dealer. It makes your choices hollow when your characters bring up the same outcome.
Should I go back to Seattle?
Maybe I can try and explain everything. What happened?
You should do what you think is best. If going to Mexico seems like the right thing to do, then so be it.
So even if you want to go back, the game says no.
You gotta trust me this one time.
No, I don't. Not after what you did. But yes, we have to be a team to rescue Daniel.
No, but yes.
Got this, Sean. Daniel can open that safe with his eyes closed. Come on. No, Meryl's probably wasted, like every night. You guys can get to Puerto Lobos in style, with a nest egg. You don't want Daniel to be homeless anymore, right? Huh? Then let's do this. I wouldn't let you in on this if I had any doubt.
I can't, Finn. No way. Too dangerous for Daniel.
Nah. Daniel is the dangerous one. Nobody can even touch him.
12 seconds later.
Finn is out of control.
Has he done this before?
Fuck us over? Not like this.
Why now?
Because Finn thinks Daniel is his golden ticket?
Ah, shit! You scared the shit out of me.
Good. What the fuck are you doing? Didn't we settle this, man?
Shh! You're gonna wake Meryl.
Finn, no fucking way.
Come on, Sean.
Are you kidding me? How could you do that, Finn? And you're a fucking kid.
Thanks for respecting my choices, game. The illusion of choice rears its ugly head, and you can see the strings from the puppet master. And there are other aspects that your choice doesn't matter. Take episode 2 for a prime example. In episode 1, you have a choice to throw your phone away so the cops can't trace you, even though that makes no sense. You can then choose to not call Sean's friend Lila. The goal is to stay hidden and not arouse suspicion from the police, right? Well, guess what? No matter what you do, you'll be forced to go into town, and then you're forced to get Daniel a present. And if you don't have enough money, well, you'll be forced to steal.
Better find a gift for Daniel quick, while he's still busy with Chris. This is so different. I don't... I know it sucks, but Daniel deserves it too, right?
Even if you don't use the phone or the internet, the police still come because someone saw you at the market and you're forced to run away. Thanks, game! One more example and we'll move on. In that same chapter, Daniel will want to check out Karen's room and, well...
I want to go check on the room. Upstairs. I know it's Mom's. Please.
Daniel, you heard Claire. They will freak out if they know we went inside.
We won't tell them. We'll be in total stealth mode.
12 seconds later.
Sean, this is super easy. I can just break the lock with my power.
Stealth mode, huh, Daniel? As you can see, even if you don't want to, you still gotta do this. And this just makes me dislike the characters in the game's choices as a whole. What's even the point of the choices if they don't actually affect the path? It's like Final Fantasy Hallway all over again!
Hey, Michael. Yeah? Try to play the game. I thought I was playing the game, John. But I've been using the wrong controller the whole time.
Here's the thing. The characters, including Sean, are out of my control. Don't Nod is completely focused on how Daniel sees you, and while there are some effects to that degree, it's at the cost of changing the story. I was forced to do stupid things in episode 1. I was forced to do stupid things in episode 2. The smoke has disappeared and the mirrors are shattered. The illusion of choice has been broken, which is the worst thing you can do for a game that says that your choices do matter. And we go back to Sean and Daniel as characters, and how the redundancy actively hurts them as such. Not help that I don't find them to be compelling characters. Sean especially, since I find him to be extremely bland and boring. Sean is the typical teenager who's not too confident in himself and who suddenly has to grow up in order to take care of his little brother. He isn't really charming, he isn't really all that interesting. He's average, and while that's great for realism, that in of itself is a problem. Average people are boring as all hell. Chloe, for all the issues I had with her, I could easily say she didn't bore me. She pissed me off and made me question the blood alcohol level of all those working for Don't Nod, but at the very least, she had my attention. Sean? Well, there's not much to say about the guy. He likes to draw, he's a furry, but there's not much to make for me really care for him. Sure, bad things happen to the kid, but just because there are bad things happening to him, that doesn't make for a compelling character. It's like the writers don't know any way of conveying emotion and therefore just threw up their hands at every turn and wrote in a violent act. After getting punched in the face or stomach for the 3rd or 5th time, it tends to lose its effect. For crying out loud, it even happens in the church, multiple times! Violence being substituted for emotion is the hallmark of bad writing. Let me put it like this. Violence being used in place of actual emotion is kind of a telltale sign of bad writing. It's kind of what you get when you see Michael Bay pull this. If I had to say anything that was even remotely good about the characters in this regard, it's the relationship with Daniel. But as I said, there are plenty of times where Daniel just did outright stupid things that didn't make me care for the kid. Daniel is still a little kid, naive and childish. He wants his way and often gets in trouble with Sean. To make things even more painful, Daniel is painted as an obnoxious brat. He's supposed to be 9 years old, but the writers seem to give him the brains of someone with half that age at best. So you have to babysit this crybaby the whole time who can't exercise any form of judgment. Makes you wonder what kind of education he got for the last 8 years. Pro tip to writers. Please, don't write children as utterly stupid. They are typically smarter than you think. Hell, I've seen a lot of smart kid characters who can be very compelling and not be annoying. There's also the fact that the voice acting isn't all that great either. All in all, I don't really like the characters. They're mostly just boring to me. Well, we've gotten to the point of the video that I'm dreading. The political commentary.
Then go back to your own country.
I'm gonna point this out from the get-go. Yes, I am well aware that people like this do exist. I'm not trying to deny that. But the problem is that it's so one note and black and white, it practically beats you over the head. And it lacks any sort of subtlety or nuance. The messages that the game is trying to give are so obvious that I want to know that being racist is bad. I could have spent 2 minutes on Twitter and saved myself time, money, and the headaches that this game's fan base is going to give me after this video goes up to learn that lesson. Racism is bad. Well, thanks for that one, Don't Nod.
You're the reason we need to build it.
Yes! Ah! There is no such thing as subtlety in this game.
Life is Strange 2 has the desire to talk about racism, but Life is Strange 2 can make a compelling or interesting antagonist for even a short vignette. Don't Nod doesn't spend any time exploring racism or racist people. Characters just hate Sean and Daniel because those characters are racist, and that's the entire arc of the villains in each of these pieces. They are single note and uninteresting, not because of their racism, but rather the lack of anything else about them. And in turn, the only thing that Life is Strange 2 can do is repeat the same message. Racism is a problem, but it's more powerful when someone can realize that anyone could be racist, or that racists may be able to hide their racism. Instead, the multiple times that Life is Strange 2 confronts racism, they choose the most in-your-face examples with it, with one-dimensional characters who only exist to be racist, so they could play out their moral stories and show characters what it's like.
You speak Spanish, Pedro?
Huh?
And why does this scene even exist? Nothing you do here matters in the rest of the game. It literally just exists to make Sean more miserable and throw in more racist white people, which the game already established multiple times beforehand. This game has nothing more to contribute to the racial commentary than everything is toxic, harmful, illegal, dangerous, irresponsible, and morally wrong. And what hurts the message more is what ethically deplorable the main characters do to other people. It's justified and waved away because they had mean things said to them by demonized caricatures of white people who have no death written to them to their characters beyond they're white and they're racist. At this point, I want to turn to my editor again for his input.
Okay, I got all of my stuff insured, everything's set. So you will go on a date with me for $50,000 in public for 5 minutes. Okay, Nami from One Piece, that sounds like a deal. Now let me just say the funny numbers. I mean, I don't want volcano insurance. Hey guys! You were just catching me at a really bad time. What did you want me to do? Oh, right, the racism garbage. Okay, so listen. Here, I'll just say that from my experiences, I was lucky enough to be in schools that had other Hispanics. Well, out of all of the Hispanics in the world, Peruvians are the least represented in all of American media. All we have is fucking Benjamin Bratt and that voice actor guy, and yeah, no, that's it. I was quite fortunate to be in a school that had just a lot of Hispanics like myself. I mean, don't get me wrong, I was still bullied relentlessly, actually, for a bunch of other stupid reasons. My weight, my social ineptitude, my autism, my gullible nature, you know, all that other stuff that completely and utterly traumatized me and fucked me up to the adult that I am today, now living in a goddamn cardboard box. Only for me to look up into the stars and just ask God, why? Why did you do this to me? What sick game are you playing at? Why is Sean hot wiring a car with his bare hands? I mean, I've seen it done before, but Sean, really? The little bitch baby furry kid who fucking draws and shit? He can get his ass kicked throughout the entire game and almost never throw a punch, but he'll hot wire a car. Fucking brilliant. Yeah, that's all I gotta say. Life is Strange, bad. Watch some stuff good.
Please, for the love of God, go subscribe to watch some stuff.
What I find more baffling is that according to Don't Nod, they did field work. The writing team also traveled across the west coast of the United States to conduct field research, and also visited Mexico to conduct research on the background of the heritage of the two main characters of Life is Strange 2. Which, if you ask me, I have to applaud, as it allows developers to get a good grasp of the culture and lands they wish to depict in their games. It kind of reminds me of Sonic Adventure. And in that game, the developers actually went to the various locations to get inspiration for their game.
Okay, Sonic, go!
It's that dedication that I really like and can appreciate that developers want to get a good grasp on realism for their games. But here's the thing, realism does not equate to good writing, and when you have a scene like the one in episode 4 that doesn't really add anything to the game or story, it hurts the overall message. The message is blunt, and it beats you over the head without talking about anything really deep about it.
Hey, Sean? Why would they build this?
Well...
Oh, you gotta be fucking kidding me!
I just find it to be overtly on the nose and extremely one note. And it's not just with the racism. Cops are evil bastards and shoot before asking questions. About half the white people you meet are evil racists. Religious folks are evil fanatics. And hippies are all good guys who just happen to love drugs. Even if you choose to steal from the drug dealer in Chapter 3, it's framed as a good thing. Did they really have to paint such a binary world in which everyone is either supremely good or incredibly evil without any sense of subtlety? But I think I know why. This is just my own theory, but... Don't Nod could be avoiding the possibility of having the audience be overly sympathized with bigots, as it mainly comes off as a heavy-handed shortcut that conveniently uses realism as a guise to avoid having more complex characters. And once again, we have redundancy popping in. These racist people do the same thing every time. They say something racist, then unsubtly allude to the former Cheeto president's rhetoric before violently acting out and beating Sean, which happens a ridiculous amount of times. It reinforces how dull the writing is and how Don't Nod lacks the care to properly tackle a tough subject. Also, side note, since I couldn't really put this anywhere else, I love how every other character is stupid too. Like in Chapter 4, before you break out of the hospital, you find that there's a message for Sean in his sketchbook that tells him where the twitchy hippie guy took Daniel to. Apparently his name was Hackerman. I like that, Hackerman. But the FBI never thought to look through Sean's possessions? Ugh. Anyway, I think you guys get it. I don't think Life is Strange 2 does a good job at a lot of things. So here comes the part of the video that I've been looking forward to. At this point, I think you guys know the drill. At this point, I talk about a game/character that I think it does a good job of what I've been complaining about. It should come to no surprise that the game, or in this case, games that I'm talking about, are the great Ace Attorney.
Objection!
Obviously, narratively, character-wise, and presentation-wise, I find these two games to be much better than Life is Strange 2. Hell, I honestly believe that these two games tackle the subject of racism in a much more nuanced manner, too. To give a bit more synopsis, you play as Ryunosuke Naruhodo, an ancestor of Phoenix Wright, who gets thrusted into the world of law after an incident that I don't want to spoil at the moment, and travels to London in order to fulfill a dream. As Ryunosuke, you'll come across several colorful characters and twists and turns in the dark underbelly of the 19th century London, trying to find the truth and defend his clients from false accusations. I'm gonna say it outright, I think this is a much better game series than Life is Strange, especially 2. So let's start by tackling the characters. With the exception of the first 2 cases in the first game, the Great Ace Attorney for the most part has its story stay in the same place. It's not a road trip story. But to point something out, with the exception of the main cast of 4, the cast for each trial tend to have some very unique characters that you most likely won't actually see again. And this is due to the personality and design of the characters. Even though you don't specifically remember the characters' names, you'll more than likely remember the characters' appearances in your head because, while grounded, they can still be quite outlandish. Rolly the Sleepy Cop, his wife Patricia, the Skulkin brothers, Drebber, Madame Tuspels, even the jury can be unique characters in and of themselves. Now, obviously, this sort of thing is highly subjective. I'm sure I'm going to get a lot of people telling me that they found Life is Strange 2's cast to be much more memorable, and that's fine, but please, hear me out for a second. When it comes to character-based stories, I'm of the mindset that I prefer there to be a hint of style over realism, as it helps punch up the story and makes it a lot more interesting. A pinch of style can go a long way to help make your story a lot less dull. I'm not saying it has to be as hot as Persona 5 style, but a little flair to your game never hurts and only helps. Hell, that's especially true with character design, and I get that Life is Strange 2 is going for more realistic, but the first game managed to punch it up with Chloe's blue hair, and at the very least she stood out from the rest of the cast because of it. I don't know, when I look at Great Ace Attorney's character designs, I see much more appealing art style, and one that will probably stand the test of time longer than Life is Strange 2, which is a problem with more realistic art styles, as they tend to age terribly as they depend mostly on the graphical capability. I'm not saying Life is Strange 2 is a bad looking game, but in comparison to Great Ace Attorney, games that are almost 5 years old at this point, they look great artistically to me. Back to the character section, at least in the main group, we have Ryunosuke, Susato, Iris, and the best character of all time, Herlock.
Technology!
Right off the bat, you've got a much more colorful looking cast, with Ryunosuke probably being the most generic design of said cast. But considering that you're supposed to be Ryunosuke, or be in his head, I'm willing to be a bit more lenient with his design. Besides, his design works since he's supposed to be a very uptight young man. Heck, in the first trial you can see as he defends himself, he's very rigid and nervous, but you can see him coming out of his shell. Heck, to point something out, Ryunosuke is accused of murder at the beginning of the first game, and his friend Kazuma is opting to defend him in court. However, and this is where I make the parallel with Sean from Life is Strange 2, the court's rigged. Not only are the witnesses being strong-armed by the government to provide false testimony,
Yes!
but it's really made apparent that Ryunosuke is supposed to take the fall in order to make sure that the relations between Japan and Great Britain are maintained. Especially since the victim in the case was a visiting Englishman who was a professor, so you got yourself an international incident. Boom! If you can't see why I make the comparison, both characters in these games are basically getting an unfair shake by the justice system, especially for a crime they didn't commit. But here's where I say that Ryunosuke is a much more dynamic character than Sean. Before the trial begins, another professor informs Ryunosuke that should he be found guilty while his friend Kazuma is defending him, Kazuma would be stripped of a chance of going to London. So, what does Ryunosuke do? He performs a selfless act in order to make sure that he can protect his friend's dream. Immediately, I'm more on Ryunosuke's side, and I'm enamored by him because of this. While stiff and rigid, Ryunosuke happens to be a very honorable young man. So much so that should he fail, at least his friend would lose his dream of going to London. Yeah, it's a boneheaded move since he's unfamiliar with the court proceedings, doesn't have any experience with the legal system, and it doesn't help he's really nervous about all this. But here's the thing, I think it's a good comparison with Sean as well, because both these characters do something really boneheaded for the sake of someone they care about. Ryunosuke putting his freedom on the line to protect his friend's dream, and Sean running away from the law in order to make sure that he and his brother don't get separated, is a good parallel if you ask me. There is a big difference, however. Ryunosuke fights back. One of the biggest issues I have with Sean was that he was just running away from his problems, and while he does become a bit more proactive in the story, his running, whether justified or not, made a very sour impression on him. But with Ryunosuke, he's willing to fight against the corruption of the courts. Ryunosuke just comes off as a much more dynamic character than Sean. They're both in similar situations where they're accused of murdering another person, they both act selflessly in order to protect someone they care about, and the characters are up against a system that is heavily weighed against them. There's another aspect to this, but I'll save that for another section. To me, Ryunosuke is a proactive character, and oddly enough, that can make quite a difference when it comes to likability and says a lot about a character. And it makes it all the more satisfying when we get the big objection scene.
Objection!
I don't know. I prefer protagonists who are actually willing to stand up for themselves in these kinds of situations, and doing it in a way that progresses them as a character. Watching Ryunosuke go from a timid paper tiger and turning into a beast who's after the truth, it just really drew me to him. Heck, when interacting with other characters, Ryunosuke seems a lot more human than the realistic teenager. Since we're able to see Ryunosuke's thoughts more often, we get his reactions to the more out there characters. But even with the interaction of the characters, most notably Herlock Sholmes, we see his personality really shine during the Dance of Deduction. One of the changes that the Great Ace Attorney brings to the table in gameplay is that it breaks up the investigations with these deduction sections, where you have to correct Herlock's deductions in various cases. During this gameplay, you move the camera around and search for the proper clues to help lead the path to the proper deduction. Even though at times Ryunosuke is reluctant to participate, you can see him really getting into the dance of deduction. It doesn't hurt that the presentation and music help make this a much more enjoyable means of breaking up the dialogue and searching, and it's at this point I need to bring up spoilers. Again, this time for real since we're now talking about key story events from now on. During the second chapter, Kazuma sneaks Ryunosuke onto the boat to get them to London, but during the trip, Kazuma's life is taken, and Ryunosuke is accused of killing him. Not only does Ryunosuke want to clear his name, but he wants to find the truth of what happened to his friend. In addition, when the case is over, Ryunosuke does the one thing that really made me respect the character. Taking Kazuma's sword, Ryunosuke takes Kazuma's dream as his own and follows in his friend's footsteps, becoming an attorney and spending all his time studying the law so he can fulfill his friend's ambitions. I gotta say, that's how you make a character work really well. In comparison to Sean, who, while he does what he does for the sake of his brother, he's doing it in the worst way possible. He puts his brother in danger, he lies to his brother, he makes more problems for himself, and I'm sorry, but I don't feel like I should like a character like that. Ryunosuke, to me, is a better character. He's in a similar situation. He's lost someone close to him, and he's willing to do what he can in order to have his departed friend's legacy live through him. There were so many other options that Sean could have taken other than going down to Mexico. He could have sought out help from his friends and co-workers. They certainly want to give him that help. I don't know, when it comes to this sort of stuff, I acknowledge that this is really highly subjective, and a lot of this is up to interpretation. Save for the presentation, music, characters, and gameplay, I will say The Great Ace Attorney objectively beats Life is 2. Besides, you're essentially getting 2 games for the price of 1. When it comes to The Great Ace Attorney Chronicles, the story takes place over both games. Now, while I do have some issues with the pacing, I will say it does set up a good mystery per episode and helps keep the journey fresh throughout the playtime. This is helped by the rather lighthearted tone that the game usually has, despite the fact that most of the time you're dealing with a case that has murder as the crime. Well, most of the time. The journey, despite the core being surrounded by a rather bleak murder mystery and the overall story having a phantom of a very terrible crime looming overhead, it has a lighthearted tone. This is helped by the colorful characters, the personalities, the beautiful background art, and of course, the music choice works really well. Then again, it's Ace Attorney, they've typically managed to do that pretty well. Hip-hop pirates that have the ability to transform into versions of themselves notwithstanding.
Yo! Don't give it up, don't give it up, don't give it up now, don't give it up, give it up, give it up, give it up. What the hell is that?
It also manages to cover a very interesting theme of racism, and it does so in a way that's a bit more nuanced than I like to think than Life is Strange 2. Let's not tiptoe around the issue. Ryunosuke deals with racism in the games. Even in the first trial, the real culprit blatantly flaunts that she's better than the Japanese people and knows that she can get away with murder in their country. She even calls their language dirty, and isn't the only example. There are much more subtle forms of racist behavior from the English characters, such as claiming the only reason why the jury could be changing their guilty votes to not guilty is because, and I'm not kidding, Ryunosuke is an Eastern sorcerer using his black magic on the jury, and the jurist calls him a dark jinx. There is a lot of this sort of talk and racist commentary from various British people, and how there seems to be a superiority complex to the Japanese. But here's the thing that Ryunosuke does that makes this message a lot stronger. Sure, he'll offer a thought about the comments, but he doesn't let those kinds of racist comments get to him. He has a job to do, and in order to do it, he powers through it. Not to mention, his actions and words speak louder than some petty racist comments, as Ryunosuke shows what he can do, solving cases and getting not guilty verdicts in otherwise impossible cases. And he's not alone. Through the courage of his convictions, Ryunosuke proves time and time again that he's able to overcome the obstacles in front of him. And here's the thing, he's not afraid of making an enemy of the entire British Empire in order to protect his clients.
Objection! Objection!
Is this less realistic?
Well, of course.
But as I already stated, realism does not equate to good. I'd rather have a much more stylish and fantastical world showing good morals can stand up to the face of corruption and abuse and racism than follow a boring story that can end with the characters essentially getting away with multiple crimes, all the while making it seem like nothing they do is wrong, that the ends justify the means, and that's something I don't care for. I'd rather take a story of an honorable young man fighting against corrupt individuals in courtroom battles to save innocence to uphold the ideals of those he lost. I'd rather enjoy the kick-ass music and character design than the bland design choices of Life is Strange 2. Hell, I'll even say that the topic of racism is covered better in this game, and I've already demonstrated that Ryunosuke deals with it, but the racism theme also takes a nuanced look by looking through the eyes of someone who might be considered racist, or, as I like to think of it, more xenophobic than anything else. Here's the thing, no one is born a bad person. No one is born racist. No one is born into this world entirely good or entirely evil. This is a belief that I hold true even to this day. And as much as the internet would like you to believe, I believe in redemption and allowing people to grow from their mistakes, so long as the line isn't crossed, of course. And that's where we reach our racist character, Barak Van Zykes, the lead prosecutor in both games, and also a character that people seem to really be divided upon. It's no secret why. On the one hand, the guy can be xenophobic, referring to Ryunosuke and Susato as Nipponese, and constantly berating the two, even going off stereotypes such as them being overly imaginative. And on the other hand, the guy's friggin' hot, okay? I'm gonna be upfront about that. As if my sexuality hasn't been questioned already in the last year. Now to point this out, I am in no way saying what Van Zykes says is good. Hell, the game itself goes out of its way to point out this sort of thing isn't good, and I am in no way defending racism or xenophobia. Being racist is bad. No shit! I can't believe I had to say this. This isn't a defense for his actions, and the game doesn't paint this out to be a good thing. If anything, it shows that it's terrible. What it does show is Van Zykes' reasoning for his attitude. Again, this isn't an excuse for his racist comments, but here's the thing that people tend to forget. Historical context, and we need to take a look at this maturely. I know it's a tough order for most people on the internet who love to write essays on Reddit or Twitter and act like they can never be wrong about anything. And to those people, I have to say, enjoy the real world, boys and girls. Welcome to this thing called life. These sentiments were common in society at the time Ace Attorney takes place. But what Van Zykes and others said and did against Naruhodo and Susato and other Japanese people, like a certain culprit/victim of said certain reporter, and other non-white ethnic groups, were as wrong then as they are wrong today in the 21st century. And here's the thing, Van Zykes admits in the game that he's wrong about this behavior. There's a good reason why I'll go into later, but I need to establish this because I've been on the net for a long time and I know that people are going to argue about. I also know people are going to take this out of context. It is fine if you don't like him as a character for his behavior, his actions, or what he's said. That's perfectly fine. I understand that some people are more uncomfortable with this, but you do need to admit that he himself acknowledges his behavior is bad and even apologizes and changes his ways at the end of the games. And I still people who know this and say it isn't good enough. This happens in the real world too, where someone does or says something bad and then they grow up, realize they were shitty, apologize, try to change their ways, but people continue to treat them like they're the same jerk they used to be. What do you want from Van Zykes and these real people? Admit they were wrong and stopping the bad behavior wasn't enough for you? What should Van Zykes do instead? Keep being unapologetically racist so you can be mad at a fictional character? Should he have died? That's not interesting, rewarding, or good character writing. We should want people with bad behaviors to change. We should want them to see the errors of their ways and grow as characters. Here's the thing. What motivation is there for anyone, fictional or real, to strive to be better if they're not given the chance to actually grow as people and learn from their actions? Especially if their previous actions were caused by a form of deceit. Great Ace Attorney Chronicles actually takes a risk and attempts to explore the concept of racism and explores why someone can have a bias against a group of people. And here's the thing, Ryunosuke actually asks Van Zykes why he has so much animosity towards him, and we learn that a Japanese person whom he was friends with, someone he looked up to, and someone who even saved his life, killed his brother. And not just his brother, but several other people as well.
When the trial reached its conclusion earlier, I thought to myself, yes, it's time. Time for you to come face to face with this hideous monster. I borrowed the key for the mask from the proprietress of the Waxwork Museum. So see for yourselves now. Confirm it with your own eyes. The truth that's been hidden this past decade.
That's the professor?
Yes, that's him.
Until now, the thought never even crossed my mind. That the mass murderer, whose crimes shook Britain as never before, was Japanese.
Barack Van Zykes had once placed all his trust in a Japanese man only to be betrayed by him. It goes without saying that the more you trust someone, the more it hurts when said person betrays you. Even more so if said person kills someone that you are very close to. In Van Zyke's case, he was so devastated that it drove him away from the courts for 5 years and instilled in him distrust of an entire group of people. Again, spoilers since this was revealed in the late game, as it turns out, it wasn't the Japanese friend who committed the murders, and in fact, he was nothing more than a pawn for a higher level of government, and the moment that Barack learns of this, he apologizes to Ryunosuke for his terrible behavior. Now, I've seen that Van Zyke's has gotten a lot of hate for being racist in general. Even in the official translation, the use of Nipponese is meant to be condescending and pointedly racist in context. But people are also missing that being racist against the Japanese is meant to be a major point with Van Zyke's character and a stumbling block on Ryunosuke's journey to becoming a true lawyer. People are upset that a racist character is included in the game at all without taking into account any potential story or character reasons behind why the writers chose to include a racist character, in this case the antagonist, in the first place. The Japanese writers, mind you. And here's the thing, Barack respected his Japanese friend, and frankly I find it really misrepresenting to say his friend did terrible things and leave it at that. People deal or don't deal with trauma and grief in different ways, not all of them healthy. Van Zyke's is an example of a person who handled it in an unhealthy way. He even admits it's illogical, but gets over it as the game progresses and is upfront with how he was wrong. The fact that he lives in Victorian England that already had that and barely knows any Japanese people before Ryunosuke and Susato makes it easier to view the Japanese as a faceless monolith that he can direct his anger towards, because the logical target of his anger that he hasn't got over is dead. Again, to point out, Van Zyke's at one point acknowledges he's being illogical with his actions, his words, and his behavior. So it's not like the game depicts his viewpoint as a valid way to handle those emotions. He's actively fighting against his preconceived notions and illogical thinking, but his emotions and trauma still haunt him. He admits he was wrong to hold such a deep loathing, and by extension, to give that loathing a voice. Throughout the games, Van Zyke's is actually shown to be quite honorable. He's a man of logic. To cling to something which he refers to as illogical is about as wrong as one could get. He also admits this was an unstoppable force that he could have controlled, but he was just too weak to do so. The hatred of what happened to his brother overpowered him and did away with his common sense. He behaved stupidly and irrationally because for 10 years, that's all he really knew. And here's the other thing that people need to consider. Van Zyke spoiled the Japanese man's actions down to his race in order to avoid the belief that there might have been a reason for his brother was killed, since the previous victims who were murdered were all corrupt members of the aristocracy of the England. A man whom was practically his only family and someone he greatly respected, to the point where he wanted to follow his footsteps in becoming a lawyer. We see it a few times in the game. Van Zyke's is in doubt. He may say vocally, "It makes no sense," but that line in and of itself is telling of a fact. He acknowledges that it's illogical. And it also points out he's skeptical about the situation. He knows something is wrong about the story. He knows there's something he's missing, but he's afraid. He's afraid that if he dug too deeply, he'd have to acknowledge that perhaps his brother was corrupt. And funnily enough, he was right. Personally, I find it a compelling part of his character that a person who is so rational in certain aspects is extremely emotional and irrational when it comes to processing his grief. And it's not like it's a heel turn change either, it's a slow burn for Van Zyke to throw away his illogical hatred as he kept on interacting with Ryunosuke. And before you say this sort of thing is impossible, I hate to tell you, but this sort of thing has actually happened in our real world.
Sitting down and talking, not necessarily agreeing, but respecting each other to air their points of view. Because of that respect and my willingness to listen and his willingness to listen to me, he ended up leaving the Klan, and there's his robe right there. I am a musician, not a psychologist or sociologist. If I can do that, anybody in here can do that. Take the time to sit down and talk with your adversaries. You will learn something and they will learn something from you. When two enemies are talking, they're not fighting, they're talking. It's when the talking ceases that the ground becomes fertile for violence. So keep the conversation going. Thank you all very much.
Now, to make it clear, this isn't a surefire thing. Nowadays, most people are too hard-headed with their own opinions and frankly don't want to understand other people. But you want to know what the real kicker is? Ryunosuke says this. Reminder that this game was made by Japanese people, and that Ryunosuke was the most prominent target for Van Zyke's racist remarks. Really speaks a lot of our main hero who's willing to at least understand where a terrible person is coming from, to learn from him, and to possibly help him. Also, to point out, Ryunosuke doesn't take this crap all the time either. Calling people out on their bullshit is a very useful step for them to notice their mistakes. However, I'd be remiss if I didn't point out that's a very Western viewpoint. It's easy for someone like me who's born and raised in America to think that Ryunosuke should stand up to himself and call Van Zyke's prejudice a little tosser who needs to think before he speaks. But here's the thing, that's not a part of Ryunosuke's character, nor is it a part of what he was grown up with. Ryunosuke is written to be your everyday Japanese person, and their view on confrontation in Japan is quite different from our own. You see, unlike what people like to think, Japanese people are non-confrontational. It's very important for them to maintain a sort of peace during conversations, so rarely will you actually hear them utter negative sentiments.
Unlike in Western societies, the group is seen as more important than the individual. If you step out of line on any aspect, it has a strong impact on the way other people see you. Your basic character and values are at stake if they judge you negatively. This is reflected very clearly in the Japanese language itself, which has both a formal and a casual form, and which makes learning Japanese very difficult for outsiders.
You know how you actually see like interviews of video game developers from Japan and they'll be extremely polite, but you know deep down they really don't care for something? It's to avoid embarrassment of other people, especially if they're addressing another person. Now, you can say Van Zyke's arc ain't great, but it still opens up another view with his xenophobia. And at the very least, it does show that racism can stem from different resources, other than just blind hatred. It also shows that people can actually change over time and realize, hey, I was an idiot, let me make this up to you. I'd even say that Van Zyke's is more xenophobic than racist, since his insanely rude comments don't come from a place of superiority, but rather from a place of trauma and bad experiences that he's had. Because while people can both be xenophobic and racist, fun fact, these are not interchangeable terms. Sometimes people think that xenophobia and racism are similar and their usage can be interchanged. However, this is not the case, as the two words are very different. Xenophobia refers to the dislike or fearing unknown or something that is different from you. Racism, on the other hand, relates to race, determines the traits of a human and their capacity for making them more superior than any other race. Now, you can be racist and xenophobic at the same time, but Barak's actions don't come from a place of superiority because of race, since he doesn't trust anyone, even other British people. Heck, I'd say he's xenophobic because of the fact his trust was broken by someone he trusted for 6 years of his life. The latest victim was his brother, and the Japanese man who did it confessed to the killings. At least that's the story he was told. You can even tell this because none of his attacks were based on what the person looks like, but rather their character. And to be frank, Ryunosuke did leave a terrible first impression by defending an obviously guilty person who was willing to falsify evidence even in the middle of a courtroom trial. At least Van Zyke's also has other honorable traits. He doesn't lie, he doesn't use underhanded tactics in trials, and he's even willing to work with Ryunosuke and give trust to Ryunosuke when he's accused of murder. Hell, there's one point in the second game where he tells one of Ryunosuke's clients that he should put his faith into his lawyer, aka Ryunosuke. And yet, people will ignore all this. You can disagree, but at the very least, the game is attempting to tackle the subject in a more nuanced manner than racists be all bad and they never change. Let's take a moment and talk about another prosecutor, Miles Edgeworth. And you want to know something? He is actually worse than Barak! No joke, before Miles' redemption, he was terrible! Think about it. Miles Edgeworth, for years, prosecuted people who were found guilty. It's all but confirmed that he used illegal means to win. We see his dirty tactics firsthand, such as manipulating the witnesses. Sure, the updated autopsy report is a meme, but what if that was real forgery like Phoenix suspected? Even when Phoenix Wright was accused of murdering his mentor, Edgeworth's mindset was, better to condemn 100 innocent people than let one criminal go free. He would do his best to find his old friend guilty. There's also that lovely moment when he threatened to reveal to the court the disorder of a mentally ill, possibly suicidal woman. Even stating, if you kill yourself, that's no concern of mine. This happened after his heel turn, by the way. But you want to know why Miles Edgeworth is such a beloved character? Because he's hot. Because he redeemed himself. We can forgive a corrupt prosecutor for ruining innocent lives due to his trauma because he realized it wasn't right, but not being progressive enough in the 19th century England is way too cruel of a sin, even after the realization that irrationally hating people is not a good coping mechanism for having the only family you have being ripped away by someone you trusted and admired. Funny thing about that, huh? Never mind that Barack is absolutely spotless as a prosecutor compared to Edgeworth when it comes to courtroom antics. Hell, Barack hates perjury, and I want to make it clear, I love Miles Edgeworth. Hell, I used to cosplay as him. But it's a double standard to say it's okay for him to be able to redeem himself while Van Zykes can't. The only thing that Van Zykes is really capable of being irrationally, inegraphically not be redeemed is that he wastes so much wine and throws glasses into the courtroom gallery. Man, my voice cracked there. Van Zykes can be a scumbag. I am not arguing that, but it ignores the good parts of his character, and I find it to be very reductionistic to view not only the character himself, but Japanese culture and how tragedy can affect people in negative ways. And it's not like we don't see other forms of racism in the game. The cases with the real-life person Soseki Natsumi, who you can argue shows how harsh racism can be. Heck, part of the reason that Ryunosuke advocates Natsumi is because Natsumi can't get an attorney because he's Japanese. So, the game shows racism, not just in different forms, but also gives a real-world example since Natsumi's experience mirrors that of the actual Soseki Natsumi's experiences in the actual time in London he had. At the very least, the game makes an attempt to showcase that racism is a complicated issue with varying degrees and motivations to have it. Things are not as they seem is a key theme to the Ace Attorney games, and that also applies to the characters. Also, to point out, when the game first came out, there was a popularity poll amongst the Japanese only since because the game didn't come to the West for a few years. Van Zykes was the third most popular character. I'm not sure what this says, but hey, it's a fun little thing to think about.
So see for yourselves now. Confirm it with your own eyes. The truth that's been hidden this past decade.
That's...
We would all be hella best friends forever.
Whether you agree with me or not, at this point, I honestly don't care. From what I've seen with online discussions, I've seen people for both these games defend and hate on them, some with good arguments, others being hard-headed, and frankly, it's tiring. I'm fine with people disagreeing with each other, but here's the thing. Most people don't want to admit that they're wrong. They don't want to listen to the other side. They don't care to even entertain the idea that there could be an alternative to their mindset. Hey, I'm no different. I'm only human. I'm not above being wrong. But hey, that's what the comments section is for, and I know this is going to be a headache, but there's only one thing I know for certain about these two games. That the Great Ace Attorney certainly beats Life is Strange 2 in terms of music. Holy hell damn horns! Seriously, one of the things I hated with the Life is Strange series is the constant use of music in scenes with no dialogue. It's a cheap attempt to elicit an emotion from the audience, and unfortunately, I can't argue that isn't an effective one, since, well, look at all the rewards!
I love how that walkie-talkie was literally clipping through his fucking hand. He wasn't holding it. Look at that! What is that? Look at the walkie... It's so bad! It's so terrible! How do you take this long to make this episode and release it like this? Oh, now it's not there? Was that a glitch? Did I break the game? Oh, there it is! Oh!
But if you ask me, it doesn't matter if a game has awards, especially considering the rewards most of the time are chosen by video game journalists. And frankly, I'm sure I'm not alone in thinking on how dumb that is. But regardless, if anything you can take from this video, it's not that I think Life is Strange 2 is good, nor do I think that The Great Ace Attorney is bad, or vice versa. It's just that I want to be able to play and enjoy games, regardless if there is or isn't a political message in it. I don't believe that politics can inherently destroy or wreck a piece of media. That's simply fallacious thinking. No, it depends on the execution as well as whatever's surrounding the message. You could have the greatest message in the world, but I'm not gonna want to listen if you keep having me do the dullest of works. A lecture could easily be teaching me the best things in the world, but if it's delivered by this guy, I'm sorry, but I ain't gonna listen. Especially if it's a medium whose main goal is entertainment. Not even Don't Nod care about this game, especially since the promotional material for True Colors included the original game, but no mention of this one. Bravo, Don't Nod! And I have a big issue with games like Life is Strange 2. Games that are heralded for simply including the politics, but will immediately ignore all other issues that the game have, and not question if it makes any sense. These kinds of games take away the attention from other games I think should get the spotlight, but also get a pass for some of the dumbest crap I've seen in a long time. No joke, I've seen people call The Great Ace Attorney, a Japanese game made by Japanese people, racist, simply because it has racist people in it and because the game at least attempted to talk about the subject of racism and xenophobia in a different, broad manner. Meanwhile, games like Life is Strange 2 basically do the racism is bad and it's suddenly being treated as the Jesus of games, even though it's a French game studio that's commenting on American politics and as such has as much subtlety as a baseball bat to the head. So, I guess what I'm saying is, go get The Great Ace Attorney. I'm tired of Ace Attorney series being in hibernation, and we need to get more courtroom battles. We need to do it before I get arrested for even having the idea to even criticize a game like, shit!
Police, over there! This is the police! Come on out or we won't beat you!
Bard, a song, if you please.
Rays of glorious sunshine, setting down such a blood red light. You never see it coming. You see that my mind is the best for eyes.
You know, I was asked a big question when I live streamed this game.
Why are you playing this dumpster fire of a video game? Angry face emoji.
And to that I say, welcome to my own personal hell, where I'm constantly wondering how long till I have till I'm out on the street. Contrary to what people like to think, I honestly like to give things that I disliked in the past a chance.
Eat shit and die.
When a new game or chapter comes out. Because, being this magical thing called a human, I have the ability to change my mind or look back onto things with nuance and foresight. This isn't a person who stabbed me in the back. This is a piece of media that hasn't actually hurt me in a deep personal matter.
你确定吗?
And yet, when I point this out, I'm treated like garbage. Typical Tuesday, boys and girls. So, I just finished playing Life is Strange True Colors, and whoo boy, do I have some things to say. The first being that this is probably the best Life is Strange game out there. Unfortunately, there wasn't that really high of a bar, and it seems that Deck 9 actually seems to understand where the faults of the previous Life is Strange were, aka the characters. Quite the improvement if you ask me, especially considering that their last Life is Strange game that they created had some disgusting issues.
Oh, Price, that was epic! You distracted her just long enough for me to slip those pills into her tea.
Instead of going with pretentious, annoying teenagers, the developers actually went with adults this time, and most of the cast is very likable. The characters really didn't do anything like steal from the handicap funds or steal a car from a hospital like the previous games, so there wasn't anything that really made me dislike the characters from a narrative perspective. You play as Alex Chen, a girl whose power is empathy. Not really all that great of a power, since a lot of what the power can do can be solved by, you know, socializing. Then again, I'm a YouTuber with a cartoon avatar. What the hell do I know about socializing? I have as good enough social skills as the people who sleep in the graveyard, and about half as much personality as them. I will also say that there's a decent amount of polish. It's probably the best looking game of the series so far, save for some graphical hiccups when the details on some objects like to pop in, and characters would often pop in on occasion. Also, there were times when I exited the phone screen that I'd catch Alex doing the almighty T-pose. I mean, it's not like...
Fuck. She's done some serious research.
But it does get distracting. I'll also say that the voice acting did a really good job, with one notable exception. And there were a few times when Alex sounded bored, too.
Horrid disharmony.
Like, I know the feeling, Alex. I just finished playing this game. And now for the part where you guys really came for. What I didn't like about the game.
Why you bully me? You fucking bitch, why you bully me?
I do want to do a deeper dive in this game after I tackle Life is Strange 2, but let's talk about some of the stuff that I thought was bad, and I will be giving my spoilers right here. Turn back now. The biggest issue that this game has is that it's really short, and has a ton of fluff. I'd even argue that it's shorter than Before the Storm, and that has fewer chapters, so that's not a good sign. And considering that $60 price tag, I think with the level of content in this game, that's not particularly a good foundation to stand on, especially when I think the game doesn't do too well with a decent story. The plot felt like it could have been just a few hours because of how much pointless stuff was squeezed in that forced you to go through. Just because a lot happens in the story, that doesn't mean it's relevant. You can put as much frosting on a cake as you like, but if you cut into the thing and find a hockey puck's amount of cake, you're not exactly delivering me a satisfying product.
What the fuck is a hockey puck's amount?
The pacing was awful, since the majority of the episodes had all their time taken up by pointless fluff that barely had anything to do with the plot. Either could be shortened down or removed altogether. I don't normally mind if a game wastes my time with a roundabout goal, so long as there's some service to the characters or development. But here's the thing, while I don't have anything against the characters per se, since they aren't bad in their own actions, there's another downfall here. Most of the characters are just not interesting. The main character, Alex, for sure is interesting, because you can read about her and learn about her, which, you know, I love reading about a character instead of being shown in the actual game. Really good stuff. Everyone else is essentially only a single basic thing you can learn about them and a memory lying around. They are about as interesting as the cat, who was the best character in the game. They aren't bad characters, but the cast isn't really all that memorable to me. The developers really went out of the way to make such a likable character for Gabe, though. You know, the character the trailer's already spoiled was going to die. This is something that developers really need to stop doing. You can easily make a trailer without spoiling it. If a character we're supposed to like dies, that's not good if you spoil that. In fact, the opposite happened. Because I knew for a fact that the brother was going to die, I kept on saying to myself, get on with it! This was such a waste of time to establish the brother character, and it became annoying very fast with how much they wanted me to like this character, despite the fact we already know he's going to die. We are somehow supposed to care about his death, and the entire game revolves around it. And it could have been much more impactful if the developers didn't put that directly in the trailer. It'd be like having a murder mystery story, except at the beginning of the movie you essentially show who's under the mask. You just make the shock useless and make the whole point hollow. Like, imagine you're about to play Persona 4, and in the trailer or in this video, this D-bag just ups and tells you that the murderer is a
Whatever you say!
My point is that maybe it would have worked if it already wasn't spoiled. Developers, have some backbone and confidence in your games. One episode in the middle of the game centered around an RPG-style game that just felt like a side quest yet took up an entire episode, with the episode only giving a few minutes further development into the plot. And while I liked the whole encounter, and if this was the case for the entire game I wouldn't be opposed to it, but it was a side thing that I honestly wished I played more. It was the best part of the game, especially with the encounters that were outright goofy, and that's not a bad thing, but it felt like this for the most of the chapters. Few of your choices also seem to have any influence on the main story, which despite what Lantern in the corner is telling me otherwise, the endings are all practically the same. Usually the only thing that varies is your romantic partner that you choose throughout the game. Then your brother, who died at the end of the chapter 1, appears before you again and basically tells you what your whole life is going to be like in the town if you decide to stay. Wait, what? I'll talk about this more when I get into the specifics of the ending, because that's what really hurts the story in my opinion, but the next issue is the powers that Alex has. They are extremely inconsistent, change on the fly, and make me question my own sanity at times. Not a hard thing to do, but still did it. In the first chapter, it's established that other people's emotions physically affect Alex. However, when it's established that she can be affected by strong emotions, it never comes up again. After chapter 1, if a character has strong emotions, they don't fully affect Alex without her consent diving into them. It's also really inconsistent. There's a point where you develop a new power, the power to steal someone's emotions, and you can do this to a few characters, and it's inconsistent as all hell with the results. One character who's angry with you blames you and a few other characters for Gabe's death, and you can take away her anger. She essentially becomes an emotionless husk, and then at the end basically gets mad at you and doesn't stand up with you when you confront the twist villain. Alright, that's fine. But when I took away the fear from the police officer, he decided to help me and confront the baddies. So you're telling me that I took the woman's anger away, and yet she suddenly decides to turn on me. Then I take away this guy's fear and decides to help me? What the heck? Now, maybe I'm an idiot. That's certainly a possibility here. And maybe I missed something. I probably did. You'll have to forgive me if I don't find these powers to be all that great. Alex's power is about understanding and feeling other people's emotions. That's it. It's basically a ripoff of Athena Sykes' power in Ace Attorney. The only difference is that it's a lot more entertaining in Ace Attorney. It's a bit underwhelming compared to some of the other epic powers like the time travel and telekinesis that were in previous games. This power didn't have that same influence that the other ones had, and were not really highly explored and significantly understood like the other ones were. Then there's the ending, where she gets another new power. It's essentially when she confronts the bad guy. I'm not going that deep into spoilers right now. Alex just develops this power out of nowhere and basically shuts down everyone else in the room just so she can argue with the guy who shot her. In fact, I'm sick of waiting. Let's talk about the mess of the final chapter. This is your last chance to step away before major spoilers. So at the end of chapter 4, we get the oh so predictable shock that a character was really nice throughout the entire game to us is actually the bad guy, Jed. Now, regardless of how predictable this shocking twist is, especially since it just rips off the original Life is Strange with Jefferson, that you have the nice guy that everyone likes in the game pretty much be the bad guy. But that's not really my issue here. No, my issue is that in Chapter 5, the writers decided to cram the backstory of Alex's father and history outside of readable documents. It literally takes up the first half of the final chapter, and it's extremely slow. Which, side note, I really wish there was an option to speed up dialogue. You can skip gameplay, but there's no way to speed up dialogue. Anyway, the reason they need to do this is so they can set up the next big twist for the ending. That Alex's father, who up until this point was barely mentioned, was one of the men who was killed in the accident that happened 12 years ago before the events of the game. It just comes out of nowhere, and the game expects you to actually care about this dramatic shift, and it just makes a big contrivance. Alex's father just so happened to be here. He just so happened to be the one of the workers who died. Alex fell down the mine shaft that was close to the accident, the one that Jed led her to, the one that she wouldn't know about if he didn't. And Alex is still able to walk, her glasses aren't even broken, and it looks like she's already healing from her gunshot wound. Gee, it's almost like the writers are trying a bit too much! And to be fair, apparently the reason Gabe came to the Haven Springs in the first place was that it was the last known place of residence of his father, which, fine, okay. I think it's kind of dumb to have this as side content in the game, since it's directly related to the plot, but if they were going to do this, they really should have had these scenes peppered throughout the entire chapters. Like, have a dream sequence at the beginning of some of the chapters. It would make sense that Alex would have these messed up memories of her past. Not only would you have more content in the previous episodes, but then you wouldn't have to cram it all into the final chapter and could open up more to have actual gameplay with the story, as well as make it much easier for the people to digest this information that we learn about Alex. In addition, you make sure all your audience has this context that isn't just tucked away in the endless traditional reading. The reveal of Alex's dad being there is also disconnected. I feel like the father needed to have a much bigger presence in the game, and not just this episode for that to have any impact, and it just feels tacked on. Much like a game reviewer who just spends so much time writing a review and just decided to throw in some random humor so people didn't get bored. Actually, upon thinking about the timeline, this whole plot twist seems rushed and surgically inserted. Like, hear me out. So we learned in the game in Chapter 4 that the mining accident that's happening, the one that took Alex's father's life, happened 12 years ago. But in Chapter 5, we see a flashback to when Alex was 11 and that her father left the Chen kids to fend for themselves, and Alex is 21 in the event of the game. You do know what this means, right? Well, people in the back who don't want to seem to listen, if the incident in question took place 12 years ago and Alex's father left her 10 years ago, how the ever-living hell did Mr. Chen die 2 years before he left Alex and Gabe? Speaking of, I really don't get why Jed was a bad guy in this. I understand he shot Alex, but we're shown specifically that he got a bit overzealous with his mining, and that did cause an accident, but it's not like he intentionally wanted to leave the crew members down there. There is this line.
We gotta move! Now! There's still men back there! They'll drown!
Oh my god!
Hell, they had a perfect setup for this that they could have used. They could have had Jed feel guilty about killing Alex and Gabe's father, and that's why he goes out of his way to help them when they show up in town. Certainly would make sense, and would have much more of an impact on the characters. Hell, go one step further and make the father be friends with Jed and have the guilt of his friend being the cause of Jed's despair. Now that I think about it, there was really no reason for Jed to take things into his own hands at the end and take Alex to the mine. As far as Jed knew, there was no way for Alex to find out about his secret. The explosion already went off and there wasn't any evidence linking him to Gabe's death. Heck, she probably wouldn't even gotten to there if he didn't lead her to the mine shaft. Jed doesn't know about Alex's power, and even if Alex didn't give up and went the old mine, how could she figure out what happened down there 12 years ago, especially when they covered up with the second explosion? Remember, like I said, he doesn't know about her power. So how would he even come to the conclusion that she'd find out? Jed never seemed to be the type to me to straight up murder someone either. Allowing someone to be killed through negligence is different, however, especially when there's so many other ways to go about getting Alex off his trail than murdering her. Despite his deeds, he always seemed to genuinely love the Chens and other people in town, at least to some degree, and we see at the bridge scene that he's all golden with the rest of the cast. He doesn't have any hint of remorse or despair to him. Just feels like it comes out of nowhere. Also, the game doesn't take into account that I decided to not pursue exposing Typhon by signing their affidavit. I did a second private playthrough just to see what would happen. Jed shouldn't have seen me as a threat after I talked to Pike, but in the bar, Alex told him she wasn't giving up without any input from me. Thanks, game. Thanks for respecting my choices. The game explicitly gave me the option to give up, and I took it. Then the game acted like I didn't. But I am giving up. Isn't that why I was given the choice to sign the affidavit? Then Jed decides me saying that is such a risk to a secret coming out that I need to be straight up murdered. So, needless to say, I don't really care for the game and its writing.
No, I'm not sure about that one. I don't know if that checks out.
I'm not saying it's on par with that of Life is Strange's glorified abusive relationship between Max and Chloe, or the extremely unsubtle politics that is Life is Strange 2. At least the characters, for the most part, didn't make me roll my eyes at them. I still have my eyeballs. I just wish there was more to the characters than a single scene in memory to them. It also doesn't help that I really didn't like the whole push in the relationships. I hate it when games do this, when they push specific relationship in games. And I got that vibe here. Didn't help that it felt like the romance kind of fell flat. The biggest issue was that I felt like I didn't get to spend enough time with Steph or Ryan. I know about what they like and such, but there wasn't really enough scenes for me to really think the romance was really worth it. As characters, I like Steph and Ryan a lot more than, say...
Where's the socket wrench set again? All I see in the garage is family stuff. You know. Not your stuff.
Oh, fuck!
But there was just not enough substance for me to believe that Alex and the relationships were in love. To cap this off, while I do appreciate that you can skip scenes that have the poignant music and cinematography to it, I don't appreciate these scenes in the game at all. Putting some licensed music that always got me copyright claimed with some surprisingly good shots doesn't really strike me as emotional. It doesn't take any actual skill, and I find the technique to be really emotionally manipulating since it's trying to get me to have an emotional response that doesn't actually exist. Like in the first 10 minutes of the game, you have Alex stopping at a bridge to enjoy the scenery. We're at the beginning of the game. Why are we doing this right now? We haven't actually seen or done anything that requires this. You haven't actually given me the ability to walk faster yet, and you want me to make this opening take more time? I literally felt more emotion playing the second chapter of Deltarune, a game that was free, has obviously lower presentation budget, and made me care for the characters through the setup that was established 3 years ago.
Say goodbye!
Look, I know this is probably an unpopular opinion, and considering I got a couple of snobs getting on my tail for apparently having fun with the game on a live stream, not an edited video where I actually take my time and reflect upon what I've experienced in a game, and nearly took what I said and warped it, I know this game has its defenders. some a little bit more crazy than others. Don't let me take this away from you. If you really enjoyed this game, that's perfectly fine. But please, just don't discount what I said just because you liked it. I feel like Deck 9 can actually take the Life is Strange series in the right direction because of this game, and this game is a good start with it. I honestly do believe this game is the best in the series, but that doesn't mean it doesn't have its problems. And now, as I sit here wasting time trying to figure out how to end this video, I guess I should say that you should probably wait till the game goes on sale before putting down $60 on it. Then again, I know that fans will more than likely pay top dollar for this game, but if you're not like people who actually like getting their brains scooped out and having their wallets drained by corporations, ironic considering the story of this game, I do implore you to get this game on sale if you're interested in it, and I hope that should the series of Life is Strange continues, they continue on an upward path that they're on. Now, if you excuse me, I still need to rip apart the sequel of Life is Strange. Just hope that... Ah, shit.